Commander Zelios Starstrike, Clan Starstrike. It has been 3 standard months since the Xyrran Empire declared war on us. We were ill-prepared at first, but our ships defending the borders managed to put up a decent fight, relying on speed and hit-and-run tactics to slow them down, but in the end they fell to the more heavily armed and strong armored ships of our now enemy. We had an inkling that the Xyrran Empire was an expansionist race ever since we first made contact with them many years ago. They were not bad neighbors at first. They were decent trade partners, and otherwise were not an overly friendly bunch. I remember when I first met one in our colony. A researcher he called himself, but I would have thought otherwise at first glance. On average, the Xyrran stood at 1.9 to 2 meters tall, 2 hands, 2 legs, 4 toes, and 4 fingers on each limb. A reptilian with scales either in hues of blue, purple, brown, or red covered their bodies aside from their head that had a short plumage of feathers in similar color. That would be the only likeness they had to us, the Illyrians. Their face was slightly protruding with sharp back-facing teeth that made them quite intimidating. On their fingertips stood sizable menacing claws that would most undoubtedly lacerate any would-be enemy. Oh, how I wished our government had seen it sooner, that all their envoys and traders coming back and forth was just a ruse, a ploy to learn of our strengths and weaknesses. Our race has always been friendly, wanting to trade and talk rather than raid and ravage. Every other sentient species we have encountered have wanted the same, to trade and prosper together. Some even wanted alliances between our species, but when the Xyrran declared war, none wanted to feel their ire and help us, none except our newest ally, the Terrans. Despite only being in an alliance with us a mere 10 months, the Terrans were quick to answer the plea for help and ensured they would aid their allies no matter the cost, though we are not hopeful that their help will come in time. Their borders are on the exact opposite side of our borders, with the Xyrran Empire, and it will take some time to arrive at our conflict borders even with FTL drive. As far as we know, the Terrans are not as technologically advanced as us, or the Xyrran. They have not shared much of their technology, and from what I have seen on my data about their diplomatic and trade vessels are nothing special, just average. But I guess it remains to be seen what their military can do. I rubbed my eyes in frustration from lack of sleep. It had been 2 weeks since the Xyrran came to our colony planet. Thierry was much like our homeworld Aleri, lush jungles, 100-meter high with patches of grassland covering the landscape, and our people made the treetops into our beautiful homes. Now I sit in a hidden military outpost on the outskirts of my hometown, contemplating my options as I have but a few hundred soldiers under my command and roughly 2,000 civilians that we can't abandon, and supplies are running low. The Xyrran are ruthless and take every living healthy Illyrian and put them in chains, to be used as slaves and entertainment for their masses in the Empire. The rest is dispatched and discarded as useless baggage. As I sat and brooded, a young clan member walked into my room. "Commander Zelios, sir," he said. "I have picked up incoming communications directed at us." He was a young adult of our clan, tall for our species, standing 1.7 meters tall, with a curved beak as all adults have, and deep sapphire eyes. His feathers gleaming a dull silver as our clan was known for. From his 2 fit arms, perched on a pair of 5 fingers, sat short, pruned claws. 2 muscular legs with well-curved talons fused neatly on each of his 8 toes, and strong gray wings were tucked neatly behind his back, itching for some release and exercise. "Is it the Xyrran or other splinter groups of ours?" I asked, wondering how nice it would be to see the young adults fly in the sky, doing our ritual mating dances, not having a care in the world. "No, sir, it is neither. The speech is Terran, sir." He called himself Lieutenant Gray, of the Umbra Vanguard. My eyes widened in surprise. "The Terrans are here. Patch it to my device and leave me in private." I squawked. I stood over the communication device on the table, waiting until I was alone in the room, then pressed the button. "This is Commander Zelios of Clan Starstrike. To whom am I speaking with?" The silence was for but a mere moment, but it felt like minutes had gone by. This is Captain Gray of the Umbra Vanguard 2nd Company of the 6th Battalion, Raven Division. Our troops have infiltrated the orbital blockade surrounding your planet. 7 other divisions besides ours have landed in other regions to help liberate your civilians and eliminate the enemy. Our main fleet, with civilian aid in tow, should arrive by late afternoon, your local time the day after tomorrow. My company and I will arrive at your location momentarily. I was baffled they were here. How in the galaxy did they manage to slip that many soldiers planetside? If their military structure is the same as it was in the human history documentary I watched, then that would mean they managed to sneak in 80,000 troops through the enemy. That is not a small number. Our colony world has just over 15 million souls, and we estimated that the Xyrran troop planet side already numbers roughly 500,000. How will they defeat that? Wait, how did they manage to contact us directly? And better yet, how did they find us? Our location was well hidden, and broadcast scramblers were in place, so it would be impossible to locate our signal. You said you would be here momentarily? When should I expect your arrival, Captain? I asked, as I shifted nervously, waiting for a response. The air started to feel cold. We are already here, the voice said in a cold, almost robotic voice. It didn't come from the device on my table. It came from behind me. My feathers stood on end, and I felt extreme fear trickle throughout my entire body. I swiftly turned around to see nothing within my room. What? Where are you? I whispered, almost too afraid to yell, as I felt from somewhere in the room cold, calculating predator eyes locking on me. From the back end of my quarters, seemingly out of nowhere, walked a figure made out of shadow, or blurry black mist in a vaguely Terran shape, roughly a head taller than me. It moved a bit, and the ghostly hue disappeared almost instantly, and before me stood a Terran-clad head to toe in armor. Impossibly dark armor with what appeared to be a compact rifle tucked by his side in the same color. It didn't even shimmer in the light of my quarter. It was like it sucked in all the light that bounced onto it, all but one part. The eyes. The eyes glowed in a low blue color. It felt eerie. The Terran walked 2 more steps, then moved his hand to the side of his face, and his visor slid open. I was even more shocked. The skin compared to the usual Terran faces I had seen before, whose skin was pink and rosy. His was gray, ashen even, and his eyes were black. All black, no iris, nothing, and his teeth, as he showed them in his so-called smile, as the Terrans called it, were surprisingly normal, albeit very white, which made his smile even more terrifying. He looked very muscular but sleek at the same time, like a sprinter and weightlifter fused in one body. He was definitely augmented in some way. Our kind does not dabble in such things, but we knew some of our galactic neighbors did. Sorry for the fright there, Commander, but I couldn't resist, the Terran said as he made a hand gesture that seemed like a salute. None taken, I said, still trying to get my nerves and mind under control. How did you get in here? Correct, he said as his grin grew wider, making me get a slight shiver. I would appreciate it if you could give me any knowledge about your town, number of enemies, hostages, layout, and so forth, so we could compare it with our intel, he said with more casual expressions. Yes, of course, I said, with more vigor than I would have liked. We keep the majority of our intelligence in the air room of our outpost so that our scouts can fly to and from it with ease. Indeed, I saw that when we arrived here. Quite peculiar, to have an intel center with no roof, but given that we are high in the treetops and you are an aerial species, it makes sense, he said as his face changed to what I assumed was a pondering expression. Wait, we are more than 80 meters above ground. They don't have wings and their bones aren't hollow, so he should be at least 3 times my own weight, if not more. This made me wonder even harder how he managed to climb up here and without a sound at that. As we walked out of my residence, we were greeted by the vastness of the jungle. Structures lay around, and between the thick trunks of trees 100 meters high, with the thick canopy above, giving cover over us from any praying eyes above. It was late evening, and the sun was about to settle down for the night. Lights flickered on here and there within the housing and platforms scattered around us, making it look like glowing flies were dancing around us. "Your world is quite beautiful," he said, as I watched his face give a faint smile as he was appreciating the scenery. "Indeed it is," I said. "Though my home and of course the capital is even more breathtaking. Houses in between the sea of trees as far as you can see, in perfect harmony with nature itself." "Then you better invite me to see it when this is all over, and we beat those scaly bastards back to their rotten empire, he said, with what I could guess was confidence glistening over his face. Oh, how I wished I shared that confidence. It was all but beaten back when our only offensive option left was to harass the enemy scout parties that ventured into the jungles around us. We walked for a few minutes towards the intel room and met a few bewildered and frightened gazes along the way. I calmed every bypasser and told them the frightening-looking shadow man was a friend, which made him chuckle. We arrived at the intel room, which was suspended between 4 large trees. Artificial vines and support beams shot out from underneath it to the trunks of the giants. As we entered, the room was quite empty as night was about to fall, and no scout would want to venture out when night came, an inbuilt defense mechanism of our species, as we had a nighttime predator that hunted us when our species was in its infancy, as well as the Xyrran having superb low-light vision. One officer of mine, an old member of the clan, stood at the central table looking over reports. His silver feather coat almost completely morphed into white, the telltale sign of a very old member of our species. The last scout of today was standing next to him, giving him reports and showing video feed from his mounted camera. "Good evening, Zephyr. How is the scouting going?" I mused as I was waiting for him to look at our direction. The scout noticed me and my companion as I gave our position away and was immediately startled by Captain Gray, but chose to say nothing. Good self-control, I mused in my mind. "This is Captain Gray of the Terran military," I explained. "He is part of the Umbra, a special military unit that specializes in infiltration and scouting. He and his soldiers will help us liberate our town from the enemy." "Well, that is splendid," Zephyr said, not really questioning that there was an alien in a boogeyman armor in the room with him. "So, Captain Gray, how many of you are there and how do you plan to help?" he added. "I have 200 soldiers under my command, and I think it's best to talk with my lieutenants about our plan here." As if on cue, 4 Terrans clad in the same armor as their leader seemingly fell from the sky. All of us jumped up in surprise except the captain, who had amusement plastered all over his smug face. Who are you?" Zephyr asked in shock to one of the presumed lieutenants, who had 2 pointy armor plating sticking upwards from the side of his helmet. The captain introduced his subordinates and promptly asked us to show our intel on the enemy within our town. After a brief scan of our database, he nods his head. "Yeah, this is about the same intel as we have on them." Now I felt flustered, although I didn't show it. This was a week's worth of information on our enemy, painstakingly gathered by our scouts over many hours of surveillance, and the Terrans had been here for what? Not even a full day. They had the same amount of knowledge about them within a span of a single day? Preposterous. "Well, it's best we get this started. You can send in your men in the morning, Commander. We should be done by then," the captain said as casually as if he was talking about putting up a shelf. "Wait, what? That's it? You're just going to head in there straight away? With only 200 men? You're outnumbered at least 10 to 1. The captain chuckled, then looked up into the darkened canopy above. "Well, men, what do you think of our odds?" As soon as he said those words, roughly 200 pairs of glowing blue eyes stared back at us from all over the open roof and branches above. His visor slid down over his face, and for merely a second the lights flickered off, and once they came back on they were gone. All of them, without a sound. I shuddered as I felt some pity for the Xyrran. They were in for a night of silent horror. I yawned as another prisoner fell to the claws of my nephew Sarnak. Another eviscerated moments later, orange blood covering the makeshift arena. These Illyrians don't put up much of a fight, do they? I spoke to no one in particular. Of course not. Chief Claw Zythor chuckled next to me. I pondered how one of our generals could even manage to get this out of shape. I could almost see his fat protrude through the purple scales on his face. I felt sorry for his belt as it was hanging in for dear life. if it had any, to hold his gut from spilling out of his uniform. These lesser beings could not even have a slim chance of defeating Prime Hunter Sarnak. Even if they were over 50 attacking him, they would not even chip off a scale on his noble physique, he continued, fixing his belt for the 4th time now. That poor belt, I mused as I glanced down from the balcony of the former governor house to my nephew as he was snapping the neck of his last victim, covered in blood to the roar of the soldiers standing in the courtyard. His muscles bulged under the purple scales that glistened under the warm evening sun, proving his nobility. His dark blue feathers swayed gently on his head as he looked up to me with a toothy grin as he spoke in a loud voice. I, Prime Hunter Sarnak, dedicate this victory to my uncle, High Chief Vorakar, with the blessing of Vorakath, the eternal conqueror. May our victories be endless, and our empire ever grow. For the glory of the empire and the eternal conqueror, I said back with a raised hand and a smile as the soldiers cheered in his name and our deity. I have never been much of a zealous type, but appearance must be held. The younger generation are more fervors in that regard, especially since the war started. To be fair, I was quite pleased as I heard from the head of the house that we entered another war. It had been too long since we had a conquest. Our house alongside House Valthor and House Nekroth were tasked with the subjugation of this planet. It was fitting as each house specialized in different aspects. Ours was land-based military, and I dare say our soldiers are among the best in the Empire, excluding the Royal Guard, of course. House Valthor is known for its excellent navy, and Nekroth has one of the largest commercial fleets in our part of the Empire, cargo ships that will arrive to carry off the cargo to every corner of the Empire, and our house will reap a portion of that profit, since we are the ones that capture said cargo. I rose from my seat and headed back inside the treetop mansion. I must admit, their architecture is quite beautiful for a lesser being, although the humidity of this place is not to my liking. Our glorious species evolved on a dry, hot world, but we are adaptable to almost any climate, but the dampness leaves my scales a bit itchy. Zithor waddled after me, cursing as he was more bothered by the humidity than I. No discipline, I thought to myself. This damn moisture is going to be the death of me, he spoke as he clawed at the itch on his neck. He has been my friend since we were young, and belonging to House Valthor was a benefit of its own as well. He demanded I take him with us to the surface when we invaded to survey the goods before the cargo trains arrived. I knew that was mostly a lie. He enjoyed toying with the females of the lesser species, especially so now as I forbade him from bringing his concubines to the surface for obvious reasons. It would not surprise me that he has tens of bastards already. We went to have dinner, my personal chef cooking up wondrous meats from my home. My nephew joined in a bit later alongside his father, my second in command, Chief Claude Drekarn. Father, you should have seen how weak they were. They are so frail and slow on their feet, Sarnak spoke excitedly. I'm sure they are, but remember, son, they are avian by nature, and on the wing they can swipe at you with the sharp talons on their feet. Your adversaries had their wings bound, so their combat capabilities were more than halved, Durkin said back, dulling the enthusiasm of his son in the progress. My brother was always hard on his son. He was never quite good enough. A praise from his mouth is such a rarity that if it were recorded, our family would write it down on a slab and keep it as a prized possession. How goes the hunting for the stranglers? I said, sipping on a delicious spirit. Not too well, High Chief. They keep eluding our scouts, and Master Tracker Morgan has lost 3 teams already, he answered back with a hint of frustration. Please, brother, we are among family and friends. No need for titles here, I mused. Always a stickler for the rules. Well, that's not surprising. Our family has always been competing. I guess that is part of the reason he is so hard on his son, for the next generation to compete about status and honor. Well, I have no offspring or wife. My work is my life. Yes, Chie, brother, he spoke hesitantly. The resistance commander has proven to be quite resourceful, ambushing our scouts from afar with snipers in the canopy and scurrying away when our troops get within proper firing range. That is quite perplexing. Have you figured out where their base might be operating? I asked. We have deduced by the ambushes that their hold is most likely in the north, as our scouts on other fronts only seem to find civilian targets that were able to escape the initial attack on the village, he replied with vigor. Very good. And how much is the tally then on the number of goods we have procured, Xythor? I continued. 10,523 that are ready to be shipped out. 2543 that were useless. Oh, make that 10,519 now, since our glorious champion took out 4 this evening, he said as he raised a glass to my nephew, which increased his spirit. All right, send 300 of our legion to aid the scouts now so they can help them in the morning sweep. That should force the enemy to make a critical error and lead us to their hidden nest, I finished, whilst finishing my glass. It will be done, Draken said, almost saluting at the table. Uncle, let me join the scouts as well. Sarnak spoke, enthusiasm brimming in his eyes again. I am ready for some real action, he continued. I bet you are, nephew, I chuckled back. I don't see why not. Do you object, Drakarn? I said, looking at his mixed feelings about the matter. The rest of the evening went by as we indulged in the fine food and small talk, old stories, future land claims, and so forth. I went back to my private quarters as they did the same. Xythor smacking his lips at the prospect of enjoying the 2 female captives he picked out of the prisoners. I pity them a bit. He is not a kind master. I entered the command center, and all the officers saluted. Get back to your respectful duties, I said in a calm tone. Drakarn was already at the center table watching a live feed on the holographic screen on the table, anger and worry written all over his face. What do you mean he is missing? He shouted, teeth bared at Morgan that was on the other end of the call. Chief Claw, calm yourself. We are already sending a party to his last known location. They should arrive shortly, Morgan said back calmly. I entered next to Drakarn. What happened, Morgan? Give me the details, I said calmly, though with a hint of urgency in my tone. Hi, Chief Sir. We have lost communication with the 5 scout parties that we sent out simultaneously, and Prime Hunter Sarnak went with the Night Hunters, and we are currently sending out search parties to figure out what happened. Figures, of course, he would want to go out as soon as he arrived, and with the experienced ones as well. He would have no better protection than them out there, so why did they go silent? Why did all of the scouts go silent? That stupid boy, of course he would want to go with the veterans out to hunt, Drakarn muttered angrily. Let's calm down, Drakarn. Morgan, how long until the search party arrives? I asked in a hurry, trying to calm my brother in the progress. They should be arriving now. Should I patch you into the video feed, High Chief? He asked respectfully. Yes, I said, the gut feeling getting more intense now. The screen split in 2 as one half showed the live feed of the soldiers arriving at the scene where the communication was cut. It was a large clearing on the forest floor, stacks of equipment laid around with the hovercraft on one side. My stomach squeezed as I saw Xyrran bodies sprawling all over the clearing, with holes in their head from projectile weapons, or wounds from blades to the body or neck, terror written all over their face. I stood in silence, mortified by the scene in front of me. Some operators were staring at the screen from their post, fear glistening in their eyes. 30 elite soldiers, all dead, no enemy combatants in sight, though laser singes on the trees around showed that the troops shot around them, shooting blindly in all directions before their end. Outside the view of the video feed came a voice from one of the soldiers. Sir Hunter, we found a survivor. It's Prime Hunter Sarnak. Drakarn almost jumped up in relief as he had a cold, hard stare before. Is he all right? Is my son all right? He shouted into the screen. The camera moved towards the location of Sarnak, where he huddled in between 2 boxes. The feathers on his head stood on end. He was quiet, seemingly frozen in place, fear written all over him. Prime Hunter Sarnak, are you all right? The hunter on the screen spoke with caution as he put his hand on Sarnak's shoulder. His head jumped up as his hands grabbed his rescuer's arm, claws digging into his armor. No, they are still here. They are watching. Don't make a sound, he pleaded, tears running down his face. Who is still here? Who is watching? The hunter asked in a frightful tone. The shadows! The shadows are here. They killed everyone. Blurs of black mist toyed with us, terrorized us, killed us off one by one until I was left all alone. I hid here, but they found me. The shadow stood in front of me, piercing blue eyes fixed on me as it said, "Ah, a noble," then vanished. I slammed my hands on the table and yelled, "Get my nephew out of there! It's a trap!" As soon as I said those words, two soldiers guarding the perimeter of the clearing got their heads pierced. No sound, no laser flash, and dropped down, pools of purple blood spewing from their heads. "Get out of there now!" I yelled as the soldiers on the screen were frantically trying to find an enemy to shoot at. The hunter pulled my nephew from his hiding place and painstakingly dragged him towards the running hovercraft. Laser shots were blaring in the background, shooting wildly into thin air as 3 more soldiers dropped dead from invisible enemy fire. They managed to get into the hovercraft as the laser fire died down behind them. The hunter yelled at the hovercraft operator as he entered with Sarnak, "Get us out of here now!" As he turned his head back to the clearing, one soldier stood in the middle of the carnage, staring at them with wide eyes as 2 sleek silver blurs stuck out of his chest. As he fell to the ground motionless, a figure stood in his place. It was as his nephew said. In the video feed stood a figure made of black smoke with 2 silver blurs stuck to its arms, its blue mechanical eyes fixed on the screen. It didn't move as the hunter raised his rifle and shot at its eyes. The shot moved as a red line across the ground, but the figure merely tilted its head to the side as the shot missed it, as it hit a trunk of a tree behind it, yet it didn't move, simply kept staring with those disturbing blue eyes. "Get moving already!" the hunter yelled as the operator was stunned silent by the events that happened. The hovercraft hummed as they began moving away, the hunter never leaving its eyes off the shadow, and the shadow never leaving its eyes of the hunter. As soon as they were about 50 meters away, the shadow vanished. I stood at the command table, eyes glued to the screen as the camera feed ended. "What was that thing?" Drekarn muttered, stunned. "I don't know, but it is an enemy and a dangerous one at that," I said, trying to keep myself composed, fear trickling down my spine. "Operator, put out a command to every officer within 50 units to be on high alert and get me a call to the ships in orbit." "Right away, Head Chief. I can't reach the ships in orbit or anyone outside the headquarters. Sir, we are being jammed." I felt the air getting cold and my scales bristled. I could only mutter a single word in response. "Shit." "Captain Asher Gray of Umbra Vanguard." "God damn it, Kyle," I said to myself as I watched the scene unfold in front of me. Lieutenant Kyle stood in the clearing where we had our successful ambush, dispatching the last guard, then looking at the 3 Xyrran as they started the hovercraft. The Xyrran who was barking orders raised his rifle and fired 1 round directly at him. He barely dodged it. Guess he was not thinking the hunter would have fired, or he was trying to act cool. That shot would not have killed him, but if it hit his visor, it would have partially melted into his face. The hovercraft sped off in the direction of the town. "Good, that will make it easier to gather all the VIPs, I confirmed in my mind. "Now then, let's see if there is any damage. First platoon, gather up," I barked in the comms as I jumped from the branch I was sitting on into the center of the clearing. 50 soldiers entered the clearing from the surrounding trees and bushes as I walked up to the lieutenant who was trying to make himself look small. "Lieutenant Kyle, care to explain the stunt you just pulled?" I asked with a good amount of irritation in my voice as I checked his neck for signs of injury. He stiffened to attention with his visor up and saluted. "Sir, I was merely doing terror tactics as you explained to the Illyrians, sir," he semi-shouted, with a hint of fear in his voice. "Is that right?" I responded back, trying to hide my mischievous grin creeping up on my lips. I have always had fun messing with Kyle, ever since we were placed in a squad together as corporal and private. Now we are on an alien planet fighting off an invasion force of hostile bipedal lizards. I am still coming to terms with that. The Terran Federation has never fought wars beyond our borders. I placed my hand on his shoulder. At ease, Lieutenant. I'm just glad that shot only managed to singe a bit of your neck armor. We may be augmented, but we are not invincible. We can see in the dark, leap stories, lift a ton, but we are still mortal. Remember that. I explained with a short sigh. And you cost way too much money to make. I finished with a chuckle. Kyle's shoulders relaxed after that statement and saluted. Yes, sir. As I walked back towards the edge of the clearing, hearing the soldiers snicker and telling him how epic their lieutenant looked back there, well, that will just flame up his ego, I thought in amusement. I turned back towards First Platoon. Check your gear and get ready for extraction. We are heading for the secondary objective. I semi-shouted in an authoritative tone. Guns were reloaded, mags refilled, wrist blades checked as they hummed in silent vibration. 2 minutes later, the Owl stealth carrier arrived. It was a sleek ship, roughly 70 meters long, 20 meter wide, and 10 meters thick at the center. It was shaped like a thick, straight feather, completely covered in the same black paint of our combat suits. The thrusters on its back barely made a sound and only emitted a tiny amount of light around the edge of itself. 2 slits opened on its underbelly, and cables for each member dropped down from it. We equipped the cables to our belts and were hoisted up. Once inside the interior, I went to the terminal that stood next to the short hallway to the cockpit. I typed a few keywords and then saw a live feed of our secondary objective, the Scout FOB that we need to take out before entering the town. The base was roughly 600 meters in diameter, a few tall trees placed within it and the towering jungle surrounding it. Tents in the west part, hovercraft landing zone to the south. East part looked like cargo and prisoner holding place, and the north barren. The Xyrran soldiers were frantically running around, stacking supplies on cargo crafts and creating a perimeter WTIA as much lights around the base as possible. By the scout drone's tally, the enemy number is roughly 350, and 322 Illyrians that are being kept in cages on the east side. And finally, the purple-skinned noble standing in the center of the camp. A master tracker, I believe his rank is. He will be the first VIP prisoner. I tap my communication device. Lieutenant Kyle, you with the 1st platoon will assault the base from the south. Lieutenant Eric, you with the 2nd platoon will assault from the northeast. I am sending the information to your COTED. I stated, skimming over the plan again. This is Lieutenant Eric, I copy. Came a booming voice from the speaker in my helmet. This is Lieutenant Kyle, I copy. Shouted the smiling bat behind me. Smart ass. Owl 6-3, Owl 6-5, take us to the designated locations. 20-meter drop on top of the canopy. How do you copy? I spoke, feeling a bit nervous as we were closing in. Confirmation came from both of the ships, and a few minutes later, we were above the drop zones. I entered my place in the launch bay and waited for the faint green light. The green light flickered, and the 2 slides opened underneath us. 50 soldiers dropped in silence as we activated our cloaking armor, landing silently in the canopy above the enemy outpost. 1st platoon, 2nd platoon, pick your targets. No flashy business. 1 tap, then move to the next. I whispered into the comms. A unanimous copy that came from the lieutenants and sergeant. Everyone moved to position around the camp, sitting on branches 30 meters up and above. Owl 6-3, give me an EMP burst. I commanded, with stone-cold resolve brimming in my eyes now, as I wrapped my finger around the trigger of my rifle, with a Xyrran soldier highlighted in my scope. Copy that, came a reply, and a split second later the entire camp went dark. Fire, I commanded, and silent death rained upon the enemy. Within 10 seconds of the initial strike, only 50 enemy soldiers were left. Hawk teams provide overwatch. The rest of you secure the enemy commander and rescue the prisoners. I voiced in a low grumble. Affirmative, came from the troops. We moved silently into the camp, making sure every panicking enemy was dealt with swiftly. Captain, I see the enemy commander, came the booming voice from Eric. He is standing 10 meters outside his tent, next to a table I presume is used for communication, should I? He abruptly stopped, then spoke in a growly voice. Sir, permission take him out? He continued, sheer boiling anger almost bursting from his voice. Lieutenant, we are supposed to take him alive. You seem agitated. What happened? I asked in confusion. As I finished that question, a screen popped up on the left side of my visor showing what Eric was seeing. Behind the Xyrran commander, in the opening of his tent, crouched a juvenile Illyrian. It was dirty, bruised, and battered, and one of its wings was almost broken off, dried orange blood staining its blue-hued feathers, and behind it lay another older juvenile, curled motionlessly in a ball with both wings cut off and makeshift dressing covering the wounds. I stood silent for a second, my eyes staring in silent fury at the screen. "Lieutenant Eric, we are supposed to take him alive, but only alive." I commented back, cold anger lingering in my voice. "Copy that, sir," came the reply back. I rushed to his location, covering the 150 meters to the center in mere seconds as the lights of the camp started to flicker on again. I stood on the end of the small clearing where the center tent was located. I saw the Xyrran standing there pointing a glowing sword at Eric, who stood 5 meters away from him, his camouflage dropped. "Stay! Stay away, devil!" the Xyrran shouted in terror. The Xyrran stood close to 2 meters tall but was dwarfed by Eric's height by almost a full head. Eric walked slowly towards him. "No! Stay away!" the Xyrran yelled again as he swung his sword towards him in a horizontal line. Eric lunged under the strike in a flash and grabbed the throat of the commander with his right arm and the sword hand with his left. He lifted the alien up effortlessly as it squealed, and then squeezed the sword arm until loud cracks of bone breaking were heard, and its arm twisted to the side from the pressure, dropping the sword. The Xyrran roared in pain, but Eric quickly shut him up by clamping tighter around its neck, which made the sound come out as a hushed croak. "You filthy lizard," Eric muttered. "You don't get permission to scream," he continued, and with full force slammed the Xyrran on the floor with a hard thud that made it fall unconscious. He raised his hand into a fist, ready to cave its face into the ground. "That is enough, Lieutenant," I commanded, whilst the thoughts in my mind wanted him to continue. "You are not controlling your strength. Stand down," I continued, my voice stern in both anger and grief. Eric lingered there with his hand raised for a long moment. "That is an order, Lieutenant," I shouted as I walked towards him and placed my hand on his shoulder. "Go tend to the kids. Let me deal with this filth," I stated as I gently pulled him back and called in the medics. Eric jogged to where the frightened child sat. It cowered further into the tent, which made Eric flinch. Eric knelt down on one knee in front of the child and got an item from his belt bag. He brought up a small cylinder with a hole in it, turned it on, and tens of tiny soap bubbles glowing in all colors of the rainbow floated in the air around them. The child seemed mesmerized by the display, and what could only be seen as their version of wondrous amusement was shining on its face. That Eric, always a softy when it came to children, as I saw his frame relax, and he picked up the child as gently as one would be with a newborn baby. The platoon medics were at the scene now alongside a few soldiers, and started to tend to the children straight away. I commanded the soldiers to take the prisoner to the OWL transport holding cell, as both ships were landing in the clearing to the north. "Captain Gray, this is Lieutenant Kyle. I have all the rescued prisoners here. They are pretty banged up, and some are malnourished. We don't have room in the Owls, and we need to head south to the town. What should we do?" came through the comms. What indeed should we do here? I was not really thinking what to do after rescuing the POWs. Why not get the Illyrians to help? "Don't worry, Lieutenant. I believe we can ask our allies for help there," I responded as I briskly searched for the frequency of the Illyrian hidden outpost. "Starstrike Outpost, this is Captain Gray. Can you hear me?" I asked in a friendly tone. A few moments went by. "Captain? This is Zelios, I hear you," came in response. "Ah, Commander, just the person I was hoping for. Glad to see you are still awake," I said gleefully. "We have rescued 322 Illyrian prisoners from the Xyrran scout camp north of the town, but we do not have time to ferry them away. Do you have time and resources to take over for us?" I asked in a respectful tone. "By the sky, thank you, Captain. Yes, we can take care of it." I heard him squawk back in excitement. All right, Commander. We will leave one of our squads here alongside medics to treat the wounded. I will send you the coordinates now," I answered back. "Thank you, Captain. We will arrive as soon as we can," came the reply. "All right, time to get going. First platoon, second platoon, we are boarding. Third squad of second platoon will stay behind and guard the civilians until Allied backup arrives," I voiced, now full of spirit after seeing the atrocities that the enemy has done to the innocent. "Captain," came a booming voice behind me, "I would like to stay, and besides, I don't think this little one will let go of me," chuckled Eric as the Illyrian child was clinging hard to his chest with one arm and playing with the bubble machine in the other as a medic was tending to its wounds. "All right, Lieutenant. Sergeant Foster shall take over as leader of the second platoon as you are preoccupied." I laughed back as I then left towards the carrier. I entered the craft and walked to the console. I typed a few keys and checked on the status of the other platoons and looked over the live feed from the spy drones over the town. Roughly 2,000 enemies are in the town and are now on high alert as I could see and hear the blaring alarm through the audio. Stationary guns and combat hovercrafts were being deployed to all major areas, as well as personnel priming the ships meant for orbit. This will take some time, I thought to myself. The screen suddenly faded to a live video feed of a middle-aged ashen human in a pristine dark blue uniform and cap, his black eyes fixed on the screen. "Captain, how fares the mission?" said the man, with an air of authority in his voice. "Major Cart, sir. We just finished eliminating the scout base and rescued civilian prisoners from there and are heading towards the town now." I responded in surprise as I saluted. "At ease, soldier. That is good news, and I expect you to carry out the rest of the mission without fault, and I wish you good luck in your hunting," he gruffed as he was about to end the call. "Sir, before you go, I wish to show you something," I said in a hurry, my hands behind my back as I stood at attention. "Well, spill it out, will you?" he said as he looked back with intrigue. I showed him the video of the two Illyrian children. His burrows frowned as shock and anger trickled over his face. "Captain, is what I am watching taken from your recent fight?" he spat out in disgust. "Yes, sir. The enemy commander was viciously toying with civilian children." I responded back in barely contained rage as I stared at the picture on the screen. "Right, Captain Gray. I give you temporary command over 4th and 5th Company. Use them to their full effect. I will also give you 2 Shadow Striders to help you with any pesky gun emplacements. That is the only things I can give you at this moment. Make those scaly bastards pay," he said in a low growl with a devil's grin. "That's more than enough, sir, and I will make them pay. I promise you that," I answered back in a salute. The Major ended the call, and I stood in front of the console in silence for a moment. "Raven 6, this is Corvus 2. I need you to give me a direct video call to the enemy HQ, I said in an even tone. A moment's pause came before an answer. "Copy that, Corvus 2, I will patch you through," the operator said in a questioning tone. Tension was brooding in the air as staff and soldiers were running to and from the command center. We still had power and could communicate to every hunter commander within the town and the squads prowling around the outskirts. My nephew was almost back to us, and Drakarn was heading to the landing zone to pick him up. I didn't want to go into orbit without my family and Zithor, who was probably still oblivious to all the noise happening outside. I felt tired. My eyes were having a hard time keeping themselves open. The ever-encroaching feeling of closing my eyelids and falling into deep sleep was, oh, so tempting. I could not. So I took a good swig of my caffeinated drink and continued to look at the 3D holographic map of the town. The entire settlement stood on 2 levels. The lower, which was used for workplaces, electric stations, industrial complexes, and so forth, with tubes and elevators connecting to the ground. The upper floor was used as residential areas, shops and such, as well as its spaceport and airport, which took almost a third of the upper floor. I glanced over the defended warehouses in the spaceport, for that is where we keep our cargo, and we don't want to lose it. The tree buildings of the upper floor were all connected by sturdy bridges made of plant fiber and steel, which could take on some serious load. Many garden squares and weaving pathways lead between the wide bridges, which make the entire structure of the town look like a giant 2-layered cake with a maze on top and through it. 3 entryways were present to go from the lower floor to the top, and were after seeing the enemy we now faced, destroyed to limit their entry points to the upper floor. I saw blue blips on the map that showed gun emplacements along key roads and choke points. Anti-air rocket pods and laser turrets were placed at key locations to provide as good of an air cover as possible, and hovercrafts were being used as a rapid response force as they were centered in the middle, ready to be deployed in any direction of the town. The HQ is to the western side, close to the center and not too far from the spaceport to the south. Good location for defense and quick escape if needed. I could watch and control the flow of battle from here without trouble. Operator, how long until Chief Claude Dracarn and his son arrive? I asked with a stern voice, full of authority as to not betray my subordinates, that I was feeling nervous. They should arrive here within 5 minutes, answered the operator back. Good. I feel a lot more confident with my brother by my side, as well as making sure that they are both safe. I thought in silence. The space shuttles are primed as well, so if we need to make a quick getaway, we can... You can never be too careful when facing an unknown enemy. I continued internally. I wonder who or what they are. Perhaps they are secret Illyrian weapons? Or some sort of mercenaries? Who knows? But we are as prepared as we can be. Let's see if this enemy even dares to attack us. I will. Hi, Chief. We are getting a video call from the northern outpost. It is from Master Tracker Morgan, the operator exclaimed excitedly. That is strange. We lost contact with them when we got jammed. Patch him through, I ordered, my mind wondering how he got through. The screen flashed on, and in front of me stood a warrior, fully clad in pitch-black armor, with glowing blue eyes that were fixed on me. I stood frozen in place. My blood felt cold. The feathers on my head stood on end, and I couldn't mutter a single word. Greetings, High Chief Vorakar, came from the warrior, its gaze ever fixed on me. I am the leader of the so-called shadows that have been terrorizing your troops. Is your nephew all right? He said with a cold, even tone, tilting his head in what felt like mocking amusement. The eyes glowed from behind the visor. They almost felt like the flickering flame of dead souls. Why have you done this? Why do you hunt us? I finally asked, not caring for the slight shakiness in my voice as every eye in the command center was fixed in fear on the screen. That is a very stupid question. Why would we not? He answered, as if I asked a question to the most obvious answer there is. You attack our allies, we go and help them. Simple as that. He finished with a casual shrug. My mind raced at that answer, of course. The only sapient species who joined the Illyrians in the war. That's right. We are the Terrans, the warrior said. Now his visor was off, and his black pearly eyes stared at me with a wide grin of unnaturally white teeth that sat on gray, ashen skin. My mind was in turmoil. How did the Terrans get here so fast? How did they get soldiers through the blockade? How are they decimating my men like they are a group of Grunak being picked off for slaughter? Why does he look like that? The Terrans are supposed to look like soft pink bipedal flesh sacks, not like this. This warrior looked like he came from the very underworld itself. But why are you calling me personally? I finally asked, as I managed to get my nerves and mind under control. You have no reason or gain by talking to me like this. I continued, curiosity now rooted in my mind besides the fear. I wanted to see what kind of being you are before I come and drag you away to our ship alongside your family and your fat slave dealer friend as well, he said in an even emotionless voice as his cold, calculating gaze dug holes into my skull. How much does he know about me? About the structure of our society? I felt danger just being in his presence. And what do you see? I finally asked after an uncomfortably long pause. I see a soldier of ambition, yet lacking it. You like authority and use it to live in luxury. You have grown complacent with your own status and power. Honestly disappointing. He sighed. I would have wanted an alien with more drive as my first prisoner. He finished with an icy smile. My body shuddered. Was I simply a toy to him? No, I refused to be a simple hunt. I steeled my nerves as best I could and looked him in the eyes. Come get me then, I semi-shouted with venom in my voice. Let's see if me and my men won't kill you first, I continued, feeling more calm and assured of myself now. Tonight, High Chief Vorakar, I will make you feel some resemblance to the pain you inflicted upon the helpless Ilarians, he said finally without an emotion in sight, and his visor slid back down, and those eerie blue eyes stared at me again. I'll be seeing you soon, came the semi-robotic voice from the warrior as the video call ended. The room was silent. Everyone was too shocked and dumbfounded to really say anything. I, too, didn't really know what to do. But on cue, my brother came in with my nephew in tow. His head was down between his shoulders. Evidently, he had an earful from his father and looked thoroughly defeated. "Hi, Chief. Are you all right?" my brother asked, as he looked upon me with surprise, as I probably looked quite shaken right now. Not quite. Chief Claude Drekarn, the so-called leader of the Shadows, had a chat with me, I said with a faint smile. I promptly told my brother the entire conversation I had with this shadow leader, the fact that they are Terrans, that they despise the use of slaves, that they feel unbridled anger at the sight of us beating our property, especially the young ones. But we are the victors. It is our right to do what we want with our prisoners. Drekarn spat in anger. "Yes, Chief Claw, I feel so too, but that is apparently not how they operate," I said back, confusion still lingering in my mind. "So what is the plan now?" my brother asked in a hushed tone. "We will see how the enemy operates and defend against them here. If they begin to overrun us, we will use a hovercraft to take us to one of the shuttles and go into orbit. There we will ask the fleet for help to find and obliterate these pesky Ilarian sympathizers," I confirmed with a steeled expression. Drekarn nodded in agreement. "A good plan, High Chief. Figuring out how the enemy will act is a vital thing to know. We must record—" His speech was cut off by a sudden static in the speakers and flickering of the lights, and suddenly the center table holographic screen lit up, and 5 Xyrran children, in some sort of white gowns, stood in a line on a grassy field with flowers darted around it. They had very disturbing smiles on their faces, and it seemed like they were looking straight at us. A slow, eerie melody started to play in the speaker system around us, as the children on the screen started to sway from side to side, their gowns swaying in a slow motion, and they began to speak. From the shadows deep where darkness thrives, their baleful gaze, 1,000 eyes, the creeping chill, the silent dread, as shadows weave their path ahead. We stood there listening in silence as these children spoke in perfect Xyrran, their smiles becoming unnaturally elongated. Through whispered winds the echoes sigh, a haunting call, a mournful cry. The night descends, the darkness looms, as shadows dance in ancient tombs. The eyes of the children began to bleed as they glowed now in a blue hue. I saw my nephew shudder as he looked upon them. I called the staff stationed closest to me. "What is happening here?" I asked as a shiver rolled over my scales. "I don't know, sir," the operator responded in fear. "This video is being broadcasted throughout the town," he continued with wide eyes as more screens flickered in. Live footage from the security cameras of the town popped up and showed the soldiers being distracted by the audio and commercial screens in the town. "Beware the night where shadows play, for in their depths the Terrans sway. Their reign of terror, swift and grim, as shadows close, the lights grow dim." The security cameras all zoomed in at the same time, showing blue pairs of eyes hidden in the shadows, looking ever so still at the distracted soldiers. "Call every commander on the field! They are already here!" I yelled at the operator, fear filling my mind as I watched more blue eyes appearing on the screen. "Sir, I can't reach out to anyone. It's just coming up as static noise," the operator answered back hurriedly. The screen turned black as the video ended. "No," I managed to whisper as every security feed was now showing abrupt chaos. Every screen now showed terror-ridden Xyrran soldiers trying frantically to fight invisible enemies. Shadows with blue eyes darting around, so fast they were simply a blur, rendering limbs and heads from any unfortunate legionnaire that stood in their path. This wasn't even a battle. This was a one-sided massacre. We had no chance from the beginning. "We must get out of here and head to the shuttle," I said in a hurry to my brother and nephew. And no, they will catch us if we go out there. Sarnak stuttered as he was barely keeping himself standing by holding onto a rail. I walked up to him in anger and slapped him with the back of my hand. You are a proud member of House Dracoran. We should not cower before an enemy, but we need to retreat, gather our forces, and retaliate at a later date. Now get moving, I commanded as I stood over him, my chest high and head feathers puffed. He begrudgingly stood at attention and we headed to the entrance of the room. I turned around and told the operators to evacuate as well. They are useless here since the command center has been compromised. I exited the center and went straight for Zythor's quarters, since I've heard no answer from him. I banged loudly on the door to his room a few times. I am quite busy here, come back later, came a shout from the other side. This lustful fat sack of scales, I am here to get him out of here. I thought angrily as I kicked in the door. It came ajar with a loud crack, and there he stood, butt naked beside the bed, a whip in his left hand and 2 chains connected to custom-designed collars that neatly fitted around the neck of the 2 kneeling Illyrian women. Their clothes were almost all torn off. They were practically naked, and whip marks were seen through their feathered body by the small streaks of orange blood. Now get dressed and let's get going. We must get out of here before they... I commanded. Before the window suddenly shattered, and standing in the faint light of the room stood a shadow soldier. His pale blue eyes surveyed the scene in front of him. He stared intensely at the 2 Illyrian women before tracing the chains from their neck to the hands, and then the face of Zythor, who was struck silent with fear. He shifted a bit, and the mist around him vanished, and before me stood a soldier in black armor, with 2 pointy ears sticking out of his helmet. Who are you? What are you? Zythor muttered, fear written all over his face. I am the night. I am justice. But tonight, I am vengeance. The Terran spoke in a growly robotic voice as 2 other shadows appeared besides him. I looked at my belt and only saw my sword. I didn't have a pistol. Curses. It's back in my quarters. I turned my gaze towards the Terrans, then at Zythor. I turned around, then started sprinting down the corridor to the main entrance. I glanced back behind me and saw nothing. No one was following me. I turned the corner and ran down a large flight of stairs that got me to the main entrance door. It was open and I saw my brother, nephew, and 4 soldiers standing by the hovercraft outside, their gazes switching rapidly between every dark corner. I stopped just outside the doors to catch my breath. Brother, where is Chief Claw Zythor? Drakarn asked impatiently. Dead or captured, I spat back, gulping in air as I was trying to lower my heart rate. I pointed for us to go and we all entered the hovercraft. It hummed to life as the driver pulled the lever up. We climbed 30 meters above the town and all I could see was death below us. Soldiers trying desperately to run away only to be met with a blade in the back by a Terran soldier. Fires were lit all around the town from destroyed emplacements and hovercrafts that had been shot down. We flew in hummed silence above the screams of the terrified soldiers below. Not looking down now, I simply stared towards the raised platform where I saw the space shuttles. There were a few soldiers already by the shuttles, creating a perimeter around them. The ships were meant for the nobles to move from ground to space in comfort, and were luxury items. They were colorful, slim, metallic wonders in the shape of a 4-winged bird. Not that it mattered now. We landed near the sleek back end of the shuttles on the hovercraft. We jumped out and started jogging to the first shuttle. I rushed ahead of the group. Let's move! We must escape to orbit! I shouted, feeling hopeful that we were going to get out of here. From the corner of my eye, I saw 2 black triangle silhouettes roughly 20 meters long, floating in midair. 4 black warheads with blue light trails shot out from both ships, heading straight for the shuttles. I could not make a sound as I saw all 4 rockets hit their mark right in front of me. Both ships went up in flames as the explosions hit, killing the ones close to it and knocking the rest of us back. I hit my head on the ground and darkness surrounded me. It felt like only moments passed as I sat back up. I rubbed the back of my head with closed eyes. As I opened them, a figure stood in front of me. It was the Terran commander, his black eyes fixed on me as he stood crouched less than a meter in front of me with his hands resting on his knees. A cold, satisfied smile was sitting on his face. "I told you that I would see you soon," he said while slowly nodding his head. "You almost got away, didn't you? But so close." The Terran continued mockingly. "You fiend, you toy with us like prey," I muttered between gritted teeth. I took a breath to steady myself as I grabbed for my sword. It was still there. I drew it from the scabbard and swung it towards him. He stood there and within a fraction of a second grabbed my hand without moving from his spot, like grabbing a toddler's hand that is doing something bad. I could not resist as he simply took the sword from me and threw it to the side. "Now then, High Chief Vorakar, you are hereby placed under arrest, and will be placed in a holding cell aboard the Raven Division's flagship, the Obsidian Sentinel. Have a nice nap," he said with a neutral expression as I felt a sharp pain on the side of my neck. The world seemed to wobble as darkness encroached on me yet again. Governor Voronor Starstrike of Clan Starstrike. I woke up suddenly in the night as I heard some of the soldiers running around on the skyways above me. I stretched as much as I could within the bars of my small cage, and winced as the bruises on my wings flared up in pain as they caressed the cold bars of my prison. I muttered a curse under my beak as I didn't want to cause trouble for the townsfolk sleeping below me. I stood up in my cage, barely able to stand upright on the hard steel floor of it. I grabbed the bars and looked down to the floor 15 meters below me. In the faint light, I could see the 4 barred sections that segregated my people. One for children, one for males, one for females, and the last one for military personnel. All in all, 1,500 prisoners. The cages were large, spanning almost the entire hexagon warehouse, not counting the walk paths between them. I was horrified when I saw the machines that made these cages be brought to our town in large, specially designed ships. Huge machines that looked like an 8-sided dice hovering barely above the ground, with 2 exhaust pipes sticking out the top and holes on each side. They ate metal and other material and remade it into metal cages in various sizes and with different purposes that could be assembled together perfectly. Machines which sole purpose is to churn out cages and other devices of cruelty, and at a staggering rate, the cages that house us now were built in mere 2 days after the town was taken over. The cage ceilings over my kin were made from thick bars with tiny barbed spikes that stuck to their feathers and skin that ultimately made them lose the feathers. Many were already covered in bald spots, scratching at barbs that just dug ever deeper. Iron walkways over the cages were placed so our captors could throw food down to us. I watched in anger and disgust as the barely edible gruel that fed us was just tossed down between the bars in waterproof sacks, forcing us to eat like animals. I was placed in the middle of the warehouse next to a skywalk. The Xyrrans thought it fitting that I would be looking down over my people as some sort of a joke. The nobles often came to mock me, tossing leftover food at me like I was a common pet, and the worst of them all was that young noble Sarnak, the son of the second in command. He made it his personal mission to break my spirit. Every so often in the beginning he came to me, sneering at me, calling my people weak. I didn't mind. I just ignored him. He then tried to starve me, dangling food in front of me, just out of reach. I ignored it as best I could, and eventually the meager meals given to me came again. Apparently, the High Chief wants me alive and relatively fit for some reason. Then that young noble did something despicable. He brought to my cage children, too young to fly, dropping them from the walkway down to the floor below. It was horrifying. How could such a monster exist? The Xyrran soldiers just laughed as the helpless children tried their best to slow the fall, breaking their legs when landing or their wings in the descent as they were not strong enough, then mercilessly tossed back to their cage whilst the children's family wept in anguish. I begged him to stop after he threw the first 2 children, but he just looked at me amused that he was finally getting to me. With tears in my eyes, I watched as he continued to do this with another 2. I pleaded with him to stop, asking what he wanted. I want you to grovel and admit how weak and pathetic your species is, how futile your pockets of resistance are, and that we the Xyrran are superior in every way, he said with arrogance simply oozing from his entire being. If that was all I had to do to save the children, then I would do it 100 times over. I went on my knees and spoke out all his demands. Humph, how boring. You're far too easy to break. But I suppose that is to be expected by lesser species. So brittle and weak, he said in a mocking tone. I didn't care at the time as long as he didn't hurt the children anymore. I do feel pride in a sense that my cousin Zelios is still fighting back, since that arrogant noble kept coming every now and then to vent about him. But I don't have any hope that he will rescue us in time before their slave ships will arrive. I watched in confusion as more Xyrran soldiers were running around, the townsfolk below me starting to wake up as well, frightened and curious as to what was happening. I dreaded for a brief moment that the Xyrran haulers were here, ready to take us beyond our borders, to be sold and bartered as commodities. But that thought quickly diminished as I saw the faces of the soldiers in the low light looking nervous, as if something unexpected had happened. More noise came from outside the main door. It opened, and roughly 50 soldiers alongside a lesser noble shuffled at a fast pace into the building, walking up to the scaffolding and walkways, focusing their rifles on every window and door in the facility. What is happening? I wondered to myself, curiosity winning over my cautiousness. The red and purple-hued noble barked orders as now the 70 or so soldiers were all lined up to every entryway to the warehouse. As he was checking something on his communication device, the speakers in the building churned to life as an eerie melody started playing in it. Every Xyrran and Illyrian that was awake turned their head up to the speakers as children's voices started speaking in Xyrran. There were explosions and laser shots ringing outside. The Xyrran looked like they were close to panicking. The noble stood firm close to the center of the building, not far from my cage. "Hold your positions, men," he shouted in an authoritative tone. "We will not lose our precious spoils. Those are our orders," he continued as he lifted his glowing sword and readied his pistol in his other hand. Outside the main doors could be heard muffled shouts and gunfire. Then suddenly, it was all silent. For 10 minutes or so, I could only hear sounds coming from somewhere far away outside, and murmur and whispers within. The lights suddenly started to flicker. Then the breaking of glass was heard from the ceiling, as what looked like a few cylinders were dropping down from the openings of the windows there. As soon as they broke through the glass, the cylinders exploded, and big clouds of dark smoke instantly covered the ceiling. The clouds merged and slowly began to descend down towards the floor. The soldiers on the top skywalks 10 meters above me were the first to be engulfed in the smoke, and once inside the smoke, the screams began. Laser fire could be seen as red streaks of light within the clouds as the bodies of the first victims of the smoke began to drop down to the levels below, their eyes wide as pools of blood started to drain from their bodies. "Fire!" shouted the noble as he gnashed his teeth, trying desperately with focused eyes to spot any movement within the smoke cloud. The soldiers unleashes a barrage of laser fire into the smoke above. Holes formed where the shots went through but were quickly covered up again as the cloud crept ever so slowly down, seemingly mocking their futile attempt at stopping it. It crept down along the walls of the building until it reached the floor, and all the Xyrran were now backed up to each other in the center skywalks, roughly 50 now left. The dark plumes of the smoke danced slowly in front of them from all directions. The commander ordered them cease fire, and they looked now, nervously at the still smoke cloud all around them. Suddenly out of the smoke, a silver dart of some sort connected to black chains shot down from up above, piercing a Xyrran soldier in the leg. It roared in pain as the dart opened and 4 backward-facing hooks latched onto it. In a quick yelp, the soldier was hoisted up into the cloud. Dozens of other darts shot from all around them, connecting every time and pulling the screaming Xyrran to their doom. They tried to resist, but one by one they were whittled down until only the commander was left. He stood there in front of me, shooting wildly in all directions, yelling curses as panic seeped ever deeper into his eyes. A clicking sound could be heard as he had finished all his ammunition. Then from the clouds, pairs of blue eyes could be seen, and a soldier clad in pitch-black armor walked out of the smoke, his blue eyes fixed on the enemy in front. The lesser noble cursed and yelled as he swung his sword around. The black-armored soldier walked at a steady pace towards him as 2 vibrating blades slid out from his forearms, humming slightly. The noble prepared himself and lunged at the black soldier, slicing with his sword back and forth, but the soldier merely dodged and blocked nonchalantly, as if he was a tutor teaching a child, his gaze never leaving the noble. The soldier eventually stabbed through the sword hand of the Xyrran and kicked him back. The noble landed on his back as he grabbed around the wound on his forearm. Then another chain dart shot down and dug through his right leg. He winced in pain, then saw, as the hooks unfold and dig into his skin, "No, no, no," he yelled, his scream cutting off as he was engulfed into the Khud. I turned my head. The black soldier was now standing in front of me, looking me up and down as if to confirm something. Then his visor slid open, and I saw two black eyes on an ashen-skinned Terran looking at me. His teeth bared in a smile under a thick, finely trimmed red mustache. He was definitely a Terran. I had watched hundreds of videos and movies about the Terrans. He was definitely one, but not a normal one. "What about my people here and in the other prisons?" I asked in a pleading tone. "They will be rescued momentarily. The segregated cages make it easier as we can ask the military persons imprisoned here to help with the evacuation. Our medics will also make a triage in front of the warehouses to deal with any wounded Illyrians." The captain answered back with a smile. "I feel better knowing that. Could you help me out of here then, Captain?" I asked, relief flowing over me now. He smashed his knuckles together with an evil grin. "Not a problem, Governor." He laughed as he jumped up over the rail and grabbed my cage with one arm and swung his other hand in a fist to the lock on my cage. A loud clang was heard as a dented fist mark was left on the lock. Then he just pulled hard and flung the door wide open. "After you, Governor," he said with a smirk as he bowed politely. I jumped over to the railing, grabbing it with my feet. I flexed my wings in what felt like ages and took in a long breath. "All right, where are we heading?" I asked in a amused tone, feeling alive again. "We are going to your office. I suspect Captain Gray has finished rounding up the nobles," he answered back as he jumped down to the floor, landing gracefully and without a sound. What a wondrous piece of armor, I thought to myself as I glided down to him. We went to the army personnel cage first as I told my townsmen about the Terrans, that they were our allies and are here to help. Hearing those words from me helped calm the people down, as they were quite shaken by the whole ordeal that happened. Once that was in order, I walked with Captain Harold towards the exit. Once out, I was blasted with the aftermath of a battle. No, a slaughter. There were Xyrran corpses lying around the warehouse, being picked up by the Terran soldiers and dumped into piles. Long dark ships were hovering above the town as they put out fire with some sort of smoke bombs, not too dissimilar to what I witnessed earlier, and an eerie silence somehow loomed over the town. I was stunned for a moment before I took to the air. I flapped my wings hard to gain speed as I closed the distance on him. He leapt over one-story building like it was nothing, cutting through the winding pathways and gardens with an unnatural grace. I was probably going 45 km/h, but he was still faster than me on the straight roads. I felt the fresh air as the wind glided over my feathers. The smell of the trees was such a sweet thing to have again. Before I knew it, we were at my manor. Harold stood there triumphantly as he leaned against a pillar, not even showing a hint of being tired. "Guess I win," he said, whilst having a smug look on his face. "You cheated," I mused back as I tried to hide my winded gasps. "I don't see any evidence that I did," he said whilst giving me a wink. He opened the door as we went into my manor. We walked up the stairs to my private office. In front of it stood two shadow soldiers standing guard. They saluted as they saw Captain Harold and opened the doors. I walked inside and saw two Terrans sitting at the circular table in the middle of the room with their helmets off, talking to a hologram screen on the table. One had light gray hair, almost white, neatly cut short. He had clean, soft skin and carried himself neatly, like a proper soldier. The other had no hair on his head, but his face had a thick, kempt black beard. He had a scar running across his face from his left ear, up and over his head, back to his neck, and carried the air of a wild hunter, ready to strike at any time. The gray-haired man looked at me with a smile. "Welcome back to your home, Governor. Glad to see you are in one piece. I am Captain Gray, and this is Captain Hayes, and I believe you have already met your rescuer, Captain Harold. We wanted to ask you about a few things considering logistics and the matter of the townsfolk before you get a well-deserved rest," he said in a soft tone. "That should not be a problem," I answered back with a courteous bow. "I am overjoyed to hear that our allies have joined us, and I am relieved that this whole ordeal is almost over." I finished, clicking my beak slightly in amusement. "I am afraid it's not over yet. We still need to finish liberating your planet and kick the Xyrran back to their galactic borders," he commented back with a stern look as he gestured to me to take a seat. We went over logistical things like temporary housing and food supplies, what to expect when their main armada comes. Time flew by as I conversed with them, and before I knew it, almost 2 hours had passed. I bid them a good night as we would continue in the morning when my cousin would come. I headed to my bedroom, washed myself, and simply crashed on top of my bed, letting the sheer exhaustion wash over me as I drifted off into a deep slumber. Commander Zelio Starstrike, Clan Starstrike. The morning sun shone through the canopy, beams of light, piercing through the clouds of green, as me and my men flew in between the massive trees. About 24 hovercrafts hummed behind us, expertly weaving through the forest. They were a mix of our own and the captured Xyrran. You could see quite a difference between the crafts. The Xyrran crafts were like a sleek fish or an arrowhead with turrets and other weapons for capturing rather than killing placed on the open top and under it. Ours were more circular in look and were genuinely larger. You could say ours were like a hollowed-out beetle. All in all, we had just over 600 individuals coming to help our town of Tirasol, 200 soldiers, and the rest being civilians. I got a message around 5 a.m. that I should bring over a force to alleviate the Terrans stationed there. I was also notified by Captain Gray that he and his unit will be staying behind in Tirasol until the main Terran fleet arrives. Apparently, the Umbra Vanguard will not risk attacking the larger cities and the capital Tyrannia Prime, whilst the Xyrran have global ordnance at their disposal, or so I have been told. I pondered for a moment on the wing whilst breathing in the fresh jungle air. Less than 6 hours ago, I went with my soldiers to ferry the rescued prisoners of the enemy's scout base with a contingency of Terran troops and their lieutenant. I was surprised that he was that tall. He must have crouched a bit when he first landed in our camp, but that man has a spirit of pure kindness. Lieutenant Eric had won over the hearts of the children almost instantly despite his menacing size, with his gentle aura and quite amazing array of Terran children toys. He quickly became a favorite of all the rescued children. But the pain I felt when I saw the condition of those 2 children he held in his arms made my spirit shudder. I feel burning anger boiling inside me still, but I hope that Captain Gray made those bastards pay for all of that. They sure work fast, I thought to myself, as we were about 10 minutes away from the town. I don't think our best soldiers could have done anything that fast. Even if our numbers would be more than half of the Xyrran, our homes would have been a smoldering war zone. I hope most of our town is still in good shape. I got the call when they apparently had finished cleaning up and were sure to have finished off any stragglers. No Illyrian casualties either. And I heard that my cousin was saved alongside others of my family as well. I looked behind me as I landed on a branch. The soldiers were glistening with renewed vigor despite showing signs of fatigue. When the news reached them about the scout camp rescue, the entire outpost went into uproar. I had to tell quite a few men to stay behind as we had to have someone to guard our base and take care of the civilians. "All right, men, we are almost there. Let's push on," I said in a loud chirp, feeling anxious and excited to finally lay my own eyes upon my home again. "Excuse me, you are Commander Zelios, right?" came a voice behind me. I jumped back a few steps in shock as I let out a startled squawk. A Terran soldier stood on the branch beside me. "Ah, sorry about that. We can't turn off the sound dampener on our armor once we wear it," the soldier continued, sounding bashful as he placed his hand behind his head. "And I bet you all get a kick out of surprising your allies," I thought as I tried hard to not let my heart punch through my chest. "Yes, I am," I said back after a brief moment. The soldier stood up straight and saluted. "I was told to give you a message from Captain Gray if I stumbled upon you," he said in a flat tone. "You are to head straight to the governor's office when you arrive, and to put the hovercrafts in a designated landing zone in the ship ports." he finished as he stood now at attention. As I headed towards the governor building, I saw Terran soldiers more frequently, their armor being quite noticeable in the light of day now. They were doing drills, and by the looks of it, CQC training. The wide garden area in front of my cousin's home has been turned into a training camp. Well, that's better compared to the makeshift arena that the Xyrran turned it into. As I went closer, I saw that many of the soldiers training had their helmets off, and some even wearing what I assumed to be simple fabric shirts and pants, bulging muscles showing clear lines on their ashen skin. What surprised me was that the hair on their heads and faces was quite colorful, hues of red, yellows, and reds scattered in with brown and black hair. Whatever mutation had been done to them seems to not affect their hair follicles. I landed at the entrance as two soldiers standing guard saluted. I saluted back, and the doors swung open and saw Captain Gray standing there with his helmet resting between his arm and hip and a big smile on his smooth face. Before I realized, a figure rushed from behind him. Feathered arms reached for my shoulders as I saw the joyful face of my cousin. I placed my hands on his shoulders and we gently tapped our heads together in our familial greetings. "It's so good to see you again, Zelios," Voronor said, tears starting to form in his eyes. "It's good to see you too, old friend. I see the Xyrran tried to crack your spirit, but knowing your stubborn tail feathers, they would have needed years." I responded back with a laugh as I observed him in the light. Slight bruises and a few patches of missing feathers were showing on his wings, which soured my mood. He snapped his beak twice as a chuckle. "And they would have needed decades to crack yours, Zelios. Remember, you have always been more stubborn than I," he shot back in amusement. I snapped my beak in response as I turned to see Captain Gray moving up. "Good to see you in good health, Commander. But we must leave pleasantries aside for now. New intel was sent from headquarters, and I believe you will be needed for this endeavor," he said sternly. I looked back at Voronor, but he simply twitched his wings up in a gesture of a shrug. "All right, I'm listening," I replied back, steeling my nerves in the process, as whatever has the Terrans on alert is nothing good. "Let's continue in the conference room. There is an individual who wishes to speak to you," he finished, hesitating on those last words as he turned heel and headed upstairs, gesturing us to follow. We went up to the second floor and entered the conference room. Two Terrans stood at the table with their helmets off. One looked like a veteran of many wars with scars over his bald head and a thick black beard covering his face, and the other seemed quite the opposite, having a well-trimmed mustache and his red hair cut, short but stylish. He had an air of a sly trickster about him as his smirk seemed devious. They saluted as they told their names and rank. I now got to know the whole picture. Captain Gray got temporary command over two other companies to liberate the town along some sort of stealth bomber spacecrafts, and for that reason, the damage to the town was kept to a minimum. "The reason we need your help, Commander Zelios, is this," Gray commented as he clicked a few buttons on the Terran device that sat upon the table. It hummed to life and a 3D projection of the capital was shown, but a large spaceship was hovering just above it. The ship was massive, about 5 kilometers long, and was quite literally sparkling in hues of gold. I studied it for a brief moment. "That is a ship of the Xyrran royalty," Captain Hayes commented finally, his eyes narrowing as he took in the picture. "It landed planet-side about an hour ago." He continued as he huffed out a sigh. "Normally, we would be thrilled to have such a plump target placed in front of us, but unfortunately that ship has an AI on board." Captain Harold cut in as his lips curled into a slight frown. Artificial intelligence was not something my kind spent a lot of effort researching, and at best we have very simple versions of it. But judging by their looks, the machine on that ship was sentient, and that spells trouble. "Is that the reason you are keeping your communications to a minimum?" I asked. "Yes. Our own AIs found out about its presence when the ship entered orbit," Harold continued. "They said it's not as advanced as them and is quite slow. Hence, they could hide our presence here, but apparently that Xyrran AI is built like a brick shithouse." He finished with a huff of disdain. "I see, but how do I fall into this?" I asked in confusion. As I finished speaking, the holographic map turned off and a video feed of an avian being similar in look to an Illyrian appeared instead. It had pitch-black feathers and black eyes, a longer beak that curved slightly down. It opened its beak and spoke in perfect Illyrian. "Greetings, Commander Zelios. I am an artificial intelligence of the Umbra Vanguard. I am known as Hugin, and it is by my request that you have been brought here," it said in a tone that sounded unnaturally organic. I was taken aback by the whole situation in front of me, as I struggled to find the words to speak. Even Voronor was standing there with his beak agape. "I have gone through your military records and deem you therefore fit for a role in being a bridge between the Terran and Illyrian soldiers on ground. We need a force to keep the civilians calm, as instances in other towns we liberated have had unsatisfying results," he finished, the tone never shifting. "Civilians panicking, causing a good amount of them to hurt themselves in the process, and quite a few are in critical condition," Gray whispered to me with a sour expression. I thought for a moment, then clacked my beak loudly. "I will do as you asked. If this is the best course of action, then I will gladly help in any way I can," I replied in a militaristic tone. The AI looked at me for a brief moment, then the back end of his beak curved upwards in an unnatural smile which gave my feathers a shiver. "Splendid. You will go with Captain Gray to the Obsidian Sentinel to be given a kotad and a few rudimentary augmentations that have been fitted to your species by my brother. See you soon," he said as the video call ended. I stood in silence for a moment as I stared blankly at the now empty air. "I will have to be augmented?" I whispered under my breath. A hand landed on my shoulder as I turned to see Captain Harold looking at me with an evil grin plastered on his face. "It will only hurt for a bit when they dig under your skin. You'll be fine," he said in an obviously amusing tone. Commander Zelios Starstrike of Clan Starstrike. I felt fidgety as I sat in the small transport ship, my mind conjuring up images of how I will deal with the upcoming ordeal. Captain Gray sat beside me, tinkering on his arm tablet. I believe he called it COTAD, which stands for Combat Operations and Tactical Analysis Device. Apparently you are able to do a whole lot of things with that, and it's supposedly possible to connect it straight to the user's mind. That sounds both dangerous and disturbing, and I will get one, according to the AI Hugin. The transport shook as we gained altitude, and I could see from the viewport that we were entering thick, dark clouds. Storms were not uncommon on Tiri, as it is a tropical world, but something about this cloud cover seemed off. Flashes of lightning could be seen within it as the noon sunlight faded behind us. A slight shiver went through my feathers as we went further in. Dim light and occasional blue flashes lit up the interior, which made my companions look more menacing. Besides Captain Gray, there were 4 other Terrans sitting across us, Lieutenant Kyle and 3 of his men, their still demeanor and glowing eyes not helping in calming my nerves. Suddenly a hand landed on my shoulder and I flinched. "You feeling all right there, Commander?" Gray asked with a straight face, seemingly unbothered by the thunderstorm outside. "Just a bit nervous, I guess," I said back, trying hard not to stomp my foot repeatedly that would show my nervousness. "You don't have to be worried, Commander. We are through the screen. It should be smooth sailing until we arrive at HQ, said the lieutenant enthusiastically, mildly irritating Gray in the process. I got to know Kyle whilst we were at my cousin's house. He is an interesting character, a big fan of the so-called Batman, who is a fictional vigilante of some sort, who relies on gadgets and strong wit to fight crime and stop villains. A fitting description for the Terrans of the Umbra Vanguard, although they are significantly more dark in their profession and don't adhere to the no-killing rule. But what did he mean by the screen? "See?" he said with a smirk as he raised his hands to the sides. What does he mean by that? But to my bewilderment, the slight shaking of the ship had stopped, and we cruised through the cloud in a low hum. What trickery is this? The winds here should be fast enough that there would be turbulence, but there is none. Kyle placed his elbows on his knees and looked at me with anticipation, as if he was waiting for me to show some sort of reaction. Then he gestured with his head for me to look out the window behind me. As I turned around, I saw that we cleared the cloud cover and a gargantuan black spaceship hovered to our side about a kilometer away. It was massive, about the same size as the Royal Xyrran ship. 10 spheres of some sort hovered around it, crackling blue lighting dancing over their surface as they seemed to hold the clouds around the ship at bay, forming a cocoon around it. My jaw dropped as I quickly looked back at Kyle, who had a wide, satisfied grin smeared over his lips. "Pretty cool, isn't it?" he asked in a playful tone. I looked back at the massive ship. "It's extraordinary. Is it bending the storm cell around itself as a form of camouflage?" I asked in awe. "No, not really. I don't know exactly how they do it, but it is mimicking a storm cell and adding in all sorts of scrambled tech as well, in order to mask its presence even further. To everyone looking at it from the outside, it simply looks like a regular storm," he answered back, as even he pondered over the marvel happening before us. The ship was sleek and angular, looking like a six-winged bird of prey in the middle of a dive, with its tucked wings serving as hangars of sorts. Guns were darting out of it in symmetrical patterns from stern to bow, and faint lights were glowing here and there from it. It was a beast, armed for total carnage, and it was a stealth ship. Now I wonder what the Terran's main armada ships look like, and better yet, why do they have such potent weaponry? What sort of enemy is required to form such a unit as the Umbra Vanguard? I placed these thoughts to the back of my mind as our transport shuttle turned left, as we were heading straight for one of the massive ship's left wings. A hangar door opened, and we silently glided in and landed on a raised platform. The hangar was enormous, and ships of all sizes and purposes were stationed in it, all in the same matted obsidian color. The platform turned, and we unbuckled our straps. I shook my wings as they were a bit numb from being squashed behind my back in a seat made for Terrans. The back end of the transport opened, and I could smell the metallic air flowing in. We exited, and to my surprise, I saw my first regular-looking Terrans working in the hangar. They looked like maintenance personnel, wearing gray overalls but otherwise having pinkish, brown, and tanned skin. Guess not all who work here are modified, I thought to myself as we turned left to see an ashen-skinned Terran in a pristine dark blue military uniform standing at the end of the platform alongside a tanned-skinned Terran female in a blue jacket, long black skirt, which I assumed was an office attire, and flanking them were two black armored soldiers standing still as statues. We walked up to them, and Captain Gray and the rest stiffened up and saluted. "At ease, men," the ashen man said in a booming voice that rang with authority. Then he looked at me. "Glad to have you on board, Commander Zelios. I am Major Cart. Welcome to the Obsidian Sentinel." He continued as he walked up to me with a smile and reached his hand out. I met his hand with mine as I looked up at him. He stood almost a head taller than me. When I grasped his hand, it felt rough to the touch, and his gaze felt eerie. He was a veteran of war. Of that, I was certain. "Glad to be on board," I stammered back, still taking in the whole scenery. "No need to be nervous. You are among allies here, and there is not a safer place on this planet than here," the Major confirmed with a chuckle. My nerves calmed down a bit after hearing that. "Ah, where are my manners? This is Cassandra. She is head of our diplomatic branch," he said as he pointed his hand towards the female to his side. "She will have you sign a few documents before we can offer any of our military secrets to you," he said with a sly wink. "Geez, I am not here to only have him sign papers. He is an important allied military personnel, and this is just as much of a diplomatic meeting as it is a military one." She huffed in an angry tone and then walked up to me with a raised hand. "Glad to meet you, Commander Zelios. I am Cassandra Delaney, head of UDB. I will require a bit of your time before you go meet our scientists," she said with a warm smile as I shook her hand. "A pleasure," I said back, feeling more calm seeing as she looked like a normal Terran and not an enhanced super soldier. "Shall we get going then?" she asked politely as she gestured to me to walk with her down the stairs. I nodded, and we went off alongside the two escorting soldiers. We walked down the stairs, and at the bottom was a tram waiting for us, hovering slightly above a rail that bent around to an exit hole in the center of the hangar. "I will come pick you up when it's time to go to the research station," Captain Gray shouted as we entered the tram. I nodded and waved my goodbye for now as we started to move slowly in a low hum. The tram picked up speed, and we were off into the bowels of the ship. We engaged in small talk, but under these circumstances, the short trip just felt a bit awkward. 5 minutes later, the tram started to slow down, and we came to a halt before a station that connected to an elevator. We entered and went up what felt like 100 floors until the doors slid open and a lavish conference room stood before me. An oval table stood in the middle with furnished chairs stacked neatly under it. One chair had a large slit in the back of it, like my furniture at home. "We imitated your design so you could sit comfortably," Cassandra said as she gestured with a smile for me to sit. I walked to the chair and sat down, my wings sliding comfortably behind it through the slit on the back. The two soldiers stood guard at the entrance of the room, silently staring straight forward with their rifles in their hands, aimed to the side. Why was there a need for them? I hardly pose a threat here. Cassandra seemed to pick up on my nervous glare. They are just here for decoration, an old habit of the Terran Confederation, she said with a slight sigh. "Now, shall we get down to business?" she asked politely. "Yes, I believe we should," I said, trying to sound calm. "This meeting will be recorded as you are the first representative of an alien species that will be given secret military technology of the Umbra Vanguard, and it is imperative that I have on record that you willingly accept to undergo this process. Do you understand what I am saying?" she asked in a serious tone. "I believe I do. You wish to have an Illyrian force for crowd control and want to be able to direct and communicate with us in a more straightforward fashion," I answered back promptly. "Correct. And do I have it on record that you willingly accept to undergo minor physical alterations in order to assist us?" she continued. "I accept," I said as I steeled myself. It was now set in stone that I will undergo augmentation. I do not like it, but if it is what is needed to help my people, then I shall do what I must. She handed me a tablet which had a few documents on it. I skimmed over it, and most of them were documents about swearing secrecy about what I see and hear during my stay here, and that if I break the contract I will be held accountable by Terran laws, as well as a signed agreement that I willingly accept to be augmented. They sure are a thorough bunch, I thought to myself as I signed the last document with my name and handed the tablet back to Cassandra. She went over them, then smiled at me. "Everything is in order. I wish I had more time to talk with you, but an old crow keeps pestering me to wrap this up," she said with what looked like a forced smile. "I am not that old, and I can't really age as a matter of fact," came a voice from a speaker in the ceiling. "Oh? Are you sure about that? You sure sound like one now, forcing me to be quick about this?" Cassandra snapped back in an icy tone as she looked up at the speaker. "Not scientifically possible, and time is short. We need to have everything prepared for the operation as soon as possible. I have already notified Captain Gray, and he should arrive to take Commander Zelios to his next destination in 43 seconds. Hugin answered in a monotone voice. "Is that so? Well, it was nice meeting you, Zelios, and I hope I will be seeing you again soon," Cassandra said with a sigh as she stood up from the table. I stood up as well and thanked her for the brief but interesting interview, as I just saw a glimpse into Terran bureaucracy. Exactly on the second, the doors of the elevator opened and Captain Gray stood inside it. "Ready to go, Commander?" Gray spoke in an upbeat tone. "Ready as I can be, I suppose," I commented back whilst taking a deep breath. I entered the elevator with him and waved a goodbye to Cassandra. The doors closed, and I felt that we started to descend down. There was an awkward silence for a few moments, until Captain Gray broke the silence. "Now that you have signed the required documents, you are now considered a part of Umbra, an honorary member, and therefore if you have any questions about us or our history, you can ask away, and I will do my best to answer," he said with a kind smile. I pondered a while as we exited the elevator and entered another tram. "How are you and the Shadow Soldiers made?" I asked, as that was the first thing I was wondering when I first met him. I figured that would be the first thing that came to your mind," he chuckled in response. "To become a part of the Umbra Vanguard, one has to be handpicked by a screening team. The other major branches of the Terran military have these teams within them, and they pick individuals that fit a criteria. Good team coordination, fast response time, good physical health, and so forth. I was picked from the Marine Corps myself. Once a person has been selected, they are given an opportunity to join. Most so far have jumped at the opportunity as you get a higher pay, and the retirement fund is quite generous. But there are risks involved. Once you have signed to join the Umbra Vanguard, there is no turning back as you go through your first genetic alteration. This is the first phase, and it is the most dangerous one. A soldier is placed within a chamber where a substance is pumped into your body through your spine, which alters your genetic makeup, increasing your physical abilities exponentially and your brain problem-solving skills, as well as decreasing your response to stress so a soldier can work better under pressure. This is what turns our skin gray. This process of rapidly changing your physiology has the risk of a candidate dying as their body can't handle it, and the mortality rate is about 15%. When they finish the first phase, they are officially a part of the UV and begin training to get used to their new body. That process takes about 1 month. Then the soldier goes through phase 2, which is where they get nanobots injected into their bloodstream. This serves 2 purposes. The nanobots cause microtears in your muscles, which makes them denser and more efficient. And they also continuously repair damaged tissue, which allows for a soldier to continue fighting even with a wound that would normally be fatal. This process is a lot shorter to go through, as the soldier is already used to his new body. The third and final phase is where a soldier gets his biomechanical optics and neural interface. The biomechanical optics is the reason our eyes are obsidian. They give us the properties to see in the dark as if it was high noon. With the neural interface, the soldier's nervous systems are integrated with the biomechanical armor we wear, which also enhances our abilities a bit further. Once that is done, the soldier goes through rigorous military training for 16 months, where he is taught how to use his body effectively and work together with other privates. In those months, the ones that show exceptional skills among their peers are given a higher rank. And that is the process of how a soldier of the Umbra Vanguard is made. Gray explained, a smile creeping its way onto his lips as he seemed to be reminiscing about his own experience going through this. That sounds like a lot of work to raise a single soldier. I answered back with a stunned expression. That it may be, but a single UV soldier can turn the tide of a battle by entering behind enemy lines unnoticed, taking out enemy leaders and sabotaging convoys, he said, raising a finger as if he was making a point. I nodded in agreement, as I have seen the aftermath of their work. Will I have to go through some of these phases? I asked nervously after a bit of a pause. No, there is not enough time for that. You will be given a tweaked COTAD device as well as a neural uplink to said device. A modified version of the nanobots will also be implemented. They will focus on stabilizing your neural uplink as well as quickening your thinking power. The main reason for this is so that you can have a conversation with me or my superiors through the COTAD. The reason it is connected to your mind is so that information and orders can be transferred faster as variables can and will happen on the battlefield, he answered, looking ahead as our tram was starting to slow down. It came to a halt and the doors slid open with a soft whirl. This station was more lively. There were Terrans in maintenance grabs as well as a few who wore white coats. I presumed they were of the scientist or doctor variety. We entered through a hallway and came to a stop before a sealed door. Above it stood the words, Augmentation Chamber. I was feeling incredibly nervous now. My feathers stood on end as I tried to psych myself up. Ready to go? Gray asked with an encouraging smile. I took a deep breath. As ready as can be, I guess, I said back as the doors slid open and we entered through. Commander Zelio Starstrike of Clan Starstrike. Darkness flowed around me. I felt suspended in the air as plumes of smoke swirled lazily in front of me. Suddenly, a flat oval-shaped object emerged from the smoke and drifted towards me. It spun and stopped in front of me. I could see reflections of the smoke come off it, but the being floating at the center of it was alien to me. It looked like an Illyrian, but had pitch-black feathers and bulging muscles. It looked straight at me with its glistening black pearl eyes. It seemed frightened to see me. I raised a hand in front of me, and it did so as well in mirrored unison. Oh, by the sky spirits, is that me? I thought in horror, my fear of being turned into a monster by the Terrans filling my mind. Suddenly, a metallic voice chimed in all around me. Uplink established, injecting stimulants, it said in an even tone. I felt a sharp prickle in my right upper arm and suddenly a blinding light flashed in my face. I blinked a few times as I was starting to see shapes around me. I was in a spacious room, metallic walls covered each side with instruments of medical science draped on them. Some sort of a machine was to my right that was connected to an IV on my forearm. I rubbed my eyes as I heard a voice coming from my left. "Welcome back," Gray said in a soft voice. I looked at him and he wore a warm smile. I clapped my beak in return as a friendly gesture but quickly glanced down at my arms and torso. I still had my color and I didn't look like I had gained an ungodly amount of muscle. I breathed a sigh of relief as I looked normal, but as I looked closer, I saw some sort of a small metallic plate on my left forearm. Gray seemed to notice. "That is the connector to your neural uplink in your brain," he said in a calm voice. I placed my hand to the back of my head and felt a small metallic hexagon shape stuck there. Well, I am mostly intact, I thought, my mind feeling a bit fuzzy as I touched it. The doors at the end of the room slid open, and a tanned Terran in a white coat walked in. He had brown hair that was combed back and wore red-tinted circular glasses. "Ah, Mr. Zelios, glad to see you. I am Dr. Ethan Thompson," he said as he strutted up to the foot of my medical bed. He examined me with peering eyes for a few seconds, then looked over a handheld tablet. "Looks like the implant procedure was successful, and your body accepted the new changes without a hitch. No rejection from either the implant or the nanodrones found," he continued with a satisfied smile. "That's right. I was sedated after I entered the lab with Gray." "How long have I been asleep?" I asked sheepishly. "Approximately 2 hours and 23 minutes. The procedure took roughly 40 minutes after you went asleep, and the rest was observing the aftermath. After it was confirmed that the implants had integrated well enough, you were given a stimulant to wake up," he said as he skimmed his tablet again. "What do you mean, well enough?" I asked, concern dripping slowly over me. "Well, since time is of the essence, we had to rush things. You are not fully integrated with the implants and might have some minor side effects when you connect your COTAD device," he said hesitantly. "Anything bad we need to worry about?" asked Gray with a concerned expression. "Nothing substantial. Minor headaches, dizziness, and the occasional multicognitive episode," Dr. Ethan answered back in a professional tone. "What does multicognitive mean?" I asked, as that word sounded alien to me and my translator could not dissect it. "It means you could experience having multiple thoughts simultaneously. AI have the capability to do so effortlessly, but to a brain made of flesh it is a daunting experience and you could feel overwhelmed," he explained as he fixed his glasses. "Wow, the thought of that sounds scary," I said as I mulled over the possibility of that happening. "Not to worry, the nanodrones in your brain will help in that endeavor, should it happen. They function to keep your mind calm and sharp, and even though you were fully integrated, you would still have some symptoms when you link up." He continued in high spirit. "Now, you rest a bit longer and Captain Gray will escort you to get your COTAD. I would like to accompany you, but I have other matters to attend to." Dr. Ethan finished as he said his farewells and left the room. I sat in the room with Gray for a moment, thinking about all the moments that lead me here, and I felt unnaturally calm about it. Probably the nanobots doing their work. "Gray?" I spoke in a calm tone, not caring for ranks anymore between us, as I considered him now as a comrade. "Yes, Zelios?" he said in return with a smile as he seemed to like the fact that I asked him directly. "Why are you, the Terrans, so advanced? What reason did your species have to make all the things I have witnessed here?" I finally asked after a good pause. Gray's face became stern and he was quiet for a good while. "It's not a complex story. It was born mostly out of fear after a traumatic event in our history," he finally said as he took a deep breath. "Do you wish for me to tell you?" he asked. "If it's not too troublesome for you and my feet are still a bit numb." I responded, which made him chuckle. "All right. Since the dawn of our species figuring out how to sharpen sticks into weapons and control fire, we had no natural enemy, besides ourselves. The only thing that threatened us were ourselves, and over 12,000 years we have fought each other over everything, from resources to religious belief. 350 years ago, that changed. We had started expanding outside our own star system. We had colonized our neighboring system called Alpha Centauri. Terran society was still splintered into countries at that time, and they were constantly at each other's throats. Then we had our first encounter with aliens, he explained, the air feeling heavy as my brain was taking in the information. That is a lot of time to dedicate to warfare. Even my species had our own unification wars, but 12,000 years is a long time. I'm surprised you didn't destroy yourselves in the process. But wait, I thought we were the first alien race you spoke to, I said back in response. Yes, we have almost wiped ourselves out a few times in our history, and we technically count the Illyrians as our first interstellar species contact since the aliens we encountered 350 years ago were not sentient. They were filthy beasts, he said, with the last part leaving him with a look of cold fury. The first contact we had with the beasts we aptly named the Bellum was hostile to say the least. They were a race similar in looks to us but were blue, had 4 arms, flat noses, and were 3 meters tall of lanky muscle. They came in a gargantuan ship, 15 kilometers long over our cradle world, seemingly out of thin air. There were no words of warning or hails of greeting. They just simply opened fire upon us. 1 billion died, and then they invaded with landing crafts. They hunted us, not like animals. They didn't take trophies. They simply enjoyed killing for the sake of it. Thankfully, we had hundreds of nuclear warheads stashed on the moon, and we launched all of them. Most of them were shot down, but a few hit the ship, which broke their shields and made it collapse to the surface of Terra. My ancestors hunted down the remnants of them with burning hatred, killing every single one of them. Then they disassembled the massive ship, learning everything they could from it, down to its last bolt. Their society was advanced, more than we could have fathomed, but they were a genocidal race, and they tore themselves apart. We figured out that the ship that arrived to our planet and the individuals on there were the last remnants of their once vast empire, and they were simply looking for a place to die out doing what they loved, he explained. I was taken aback from what he said. The pain the Terrans felt back then must have been immense, and their mistrust in other sentient races would have been rooted deep. Through the reverse engineering of their tech, and then improving upon it, our species catapulted hundreds of years forward in technological advancements. From this traumatic event, we also united under one banner of the Terran Federation. We created a common language and started focusing on improving our infrastructure and military. Then we created our first AI, aptly named Odin. With his help, we advanced even further and at an unprecedented pace. With new FTL travel, we spread across the stars, colonizing star systems at blistering speed, and at one point Odin, along with a brilliant scientist, wanted to create a military branch which purpose was to be secret, lethal operatives, working behind enemy lines, and that is how the Umbra Vanguard was born, he finished with a satisfied huff. That was a heavy story to digest, but now it made sense why they are this advanced, and why their military is so potent. It was born as a necessity to never experience the same tragedy again. I remember that when our civilization's first contact happened, your representatives didn't seem distrusting or hostile. I would have expected a not-so-warm welcome, considering what happened in your past, and yet you were the most welcoming of beings, bringing gifts and charming us wholeheartedly, I said, thinking back on the live broadcast I watched of the event. The Umbra had already been surveilling your species for months before first contact happened, Gray commented back. My eyes went wide as I turned to stare at him. He wore a sad expression on his face as he continued. The Illyrians were the first sentient species we had encountered after the Bellum, and we wanted to be careful. But as we learned more about your race, the more we liked you. We established first contact with you, and I believe I can speak for most of my species when I say that we have not regretted forming a relationship with yours, he finally said with a smile. But that is enough of that now. Let's get going, shall we? He asked in a friendly manner as he stretched out a hand to help me out of the bed. I nodded as I grabbed his hand and hoisted myself up, and the IV disconnected as my feet touched the cold floor. I got handed clothes that were specially made for me, They were in shades of gray and black, which went surprisingly well with my feather tone. There was an insignia on the left shoulder of an Illyrian in flight, with 4 stars above it, which was supposed to symbolize my rank in the new militia, and on the right was a symbol of a black specter with blue eyes. We headed out of the room and into the hallway. I met some people on the way, both workers and soldiers, who all greeted me with a salute. I greeted back with a salute, then looked up at Gray with a questioning look. He looked back with a smile. "You bear an insignia that represents your rank now within the Umbra Vanguard, and they are saluting you, Commander," he whispered with a chuckle. I felt stiff as I responded to the people we met on the way to our new location. We entered a new tram that led us to what I assumed was the military quarters, since the amount of soldiers we met on the way was increasing substantially. After a bit of walking, I was proven right. We stood in front of the armory. Gray placed his hand on a terminal that was next to the door, and it split open with a mighty hiss. We walked in, and my senses were bombarded with a plethora of information. All around me in a massive space were machinery and workers tinkering away on vehicles, weaponry, and other things I could not make heads or tails of. There were loud sounds of welding and clanging of metal. Oil and other chemicals tinged the air, which made me momentarily flinch. Gray asked a personnel staff a few questions I could not hear, and we were off to a secluded section of the armory. We entered a small room, and before me on a table were 2 tactical-looking gloves and a tablet that looked almost identical to the Kotad Gray wore on his wrist, but a bit smaller. I walked up to the table, and Gray told me to put on the gloves first. I did so, and they fit well, almost up to my elbow. Then there was a patch open on my left glove where the metal plate on my forearm fit perfectly within. I took the device off the table, and it clicked in place on my left arm, almost seemed to be magnetically locked on there. A moment passed before the device turned on, and on the screen, in Illyrian stood, "Connecting to neural link," and a blue loading bar below it zoomed from left to right. "Connection established," came a voice in my head. Moments later, a mountain of information flowed in my head. I felt dizzy as I grasped at the table to hold myself upright, as my legs felt like they would fail me. Information about the Terrans flowed like a river. Their history, culture, military tactics, vehicles and weapons, and the mission ahead. Hours upon hours of knowledge was processed within my mind in mere seconds. Every emotion I could feel wanted to burst out, but at the same time it was pushed down by something as I stared blankly at the table. Gray stood to my side and placed his hand on my back. "Take deep, slow breaths and push through it," he said in a comforting tone. I looked up at him and did as he told me. I focused my breathing as I closed my eyes. 5 minutes passed, and the information flow abruptly stopped. I took a few more breaths and took a step back from the table. I looked up at Gray. If I was a Terran, I would be drenched in sweat right now. That was an experience I would not want to go through again, I said in a slightly sarcastic tone. Gray laughed at that comment. "Don't worry, you will not have to go through that much of an information dump again," he said back. I could understand him now. I didn't need the translation device in my ear anymore, as I had the standard Terran language mapped in my brain. "Feeling all right to get a bite?" he asked after a moment. "I would like that, yes. I feel like I could eat an elephant right now," I said back, as an image of the Terran mammal seemed fitting as a reference. Gray chuckled at that remark. "Well, let's hope you don't finish all the food in the mesh hall," he commented back with a bit of an accent that I now knew was common among the people of the Trappist system. We exited the room, and the wonders of the armory were at full display for me now. I knew many of the things they were working on here now. The guns, vehicles had names and purpose to them, and I understood what it was. "Your technology truly is terrifying and beautiful," I said to Gray as I took in everything in a new light. "It sure is. Even I feel it can be overwhelming at times," Gray said back as we went to the exit. We walked towards the mess hall, and I now felt weirdly at home. I chatted with Gray about his home and other small talk on the way as we met people, and I greeted them in Terran, which raised a few eyebrows in shock. We entered the mess hall, and I got quite a few heads turning towards me as we walked in, It didn't deter me as we confidently walked to the buffet table. I felt pleased as I knew most of the things on offer as the menu was vast. It was getting close to evening and I picked a hefty plate of chicken, rice, and vegetables. Damn, that is a lot of meat. Careful, that might be your long-lost relative you're gonna eat there, Zelios, came a snarky remark from Gray behind me. My kind has eaten birds before. We are omnivores like you, but we prefer fish, and I am craving for protein right now. I snapped back in response with a huff. We sat down at an empty table and were joined by Lieutenant Kyle and the troops who came with us. They congratulated me by having gone through what they called the infamous neural blitzer unscathed, as many Terrans that go through the same process when they connect to their COTAD become sick and puke or faint afterwards. It seemed I gained some respect from my ordeal, and I happily consumed my dinner as I listened to stories about their lives and experience within Umbra. As I finished my meal, a voice I now knew chimed in my head. Commander Zelios, I request your presence in Hangar B7. The officers that will serve under you will arrive in 14 minutes. AI Huygens said in his bland voice. I looked at my device and saw a map with a guideline that depicted where I should go. I looked at Gray as he nodded with his head that I should head out. Best not keep him waiting. He gets quite frustrated when people are late, he said as he stood up with me. He placed his hand to his forehead as I imitated in kind. Good luck out there, Commander, he said with a smile. Same to you, Captain, I said in turn as I headed out the mess hall. I watched Zelios walk out of the mess hall, feeling confident that he will do well in his new role within Umbra. I sat back at the table, eating the rest of my dinner, as I strolled through my own orders on my device. There was a briefing for every single captain of the Raven Division in an hour. It would be faster to give out the details of the mission directly to our COTAD, but being in person to go over plans is always nice. It gives a sense of reassurance to hear the mission briefing from your superior in person. Feeling nervous for Commander Zelios, Captain? Kyle said with his oh-so-signature annoying smile. Not at all, Lieutenant. I feel that he will do well on his first mission, and the soldiers under him are picked from his old retinue. He will be fine, but I do feel that the mission will be tough this time, I said back, not caring that Kyle was probably trying to poke some intel out of me. Why do you say that, Captain? He asked back. So far, our missions have been successful, and we will have the element of surprise this time as well. He continued with a hint of triumph. You know it's bad luck to say that, I remarked back. The mission this time will be executed in the early morning, for that is when our main fleet arrives. If that AI they have is any good, then their reaction time will be fast, and we will have a more traditional warfare on our hands, which is not ideal for rescuing civilians, I said as I stood from the table. I will message the company once I am finished with the briefing, head to the gym, or do something useful whilst you have the time. I suspect the briefing will take about an hour, I said in a slightly commanding tone. Aye, Captain, came the reply. I shook my head as I headed out of the mess hall. I went to my private quarters, which, given my rank, were quite spacious. I had a nice desk with an inbuilt computer in it, a comfy bed that I was not really using much since Umbra soldiers can stay awake for 4 days without getting tired, and finally some equipment in the corner. I went to the desk and typed in my password. The holographic screen lit up, and I saw I had a few mails in my inbox. I clicked and saw that it was from my wife. Images from my home flashed on the screen when I clicked the folder. The teal-colored sky, the trees and grass shining in hues of blue and purple across the semi-mountainous terrain. I smiled as I felt homesick. I was just being redeployed when I heard the news from her that she was pregnant. I was overjoyed hearing that, but also felt afraid as I had a duty to my Federation. No need to think about the negatives, I said to myself as I enjoyed going through the rest of the pictures. I lost track of time as I got a ping in my head that the briefing was going to be soon. I sighed as I turned off the computer and started to head out. I do hope this war will end soon, I thought as I briskly walked to the meeting room. I pressed my hand to the side of the door, which it answered with a ping, and the doors slid open. The conference room was spacious, and in the center of it was a hologram table. A few captains besides me were already inside, including Captain Harold and Captain Hayes. I went and stood next to them as the remaining personnel entered. "Feeling excited for the mission ahead, Gray?" asked Harold with a giddy expression. I had never known one besides Kyle, who has such a positive view on life in the Umbra, but I don't think I have ever seen Harold with a sad expression in my entire career with him. I wouldn't call it excitement, but I do feel a bit nervous since the only info about the mission we have at this point is that it will be the largest coordinated use of Umbra forces in history, I said back. And that is what makes it so exciting. I feel ecstatic that we will be there to witness it, he said with a wide grin. Save the sweet talk for later. We must first achieve victory here, Hayes said in a gruff tone that made Harold frown. You are such a serious man, Hayes. It would not hurt to smile once in a while, you know. Harold snapped back with peered eyes. They make a good duo, I thought to myself as I chuckled. As small talk was getting tossed around, the doors opened, and Major Cart entered the room. Everyone stood at attention as the room fell instantly silent. "At ease, men," came from his booming voice. He walked next to the table and entered a few keys on the table at the center. It came to light, and the hologram flashed to life, showing the large capital city with the golden spaceship hovering above it. The city had 5 layers stretching from the ground to the top of the canopy. It looked beautiful as it wove itself around and between the trees. All the layers had their purposes, like in Tirasol, but on a grander scale. Well then, gentlemen, I assume you are all itching to know the details of the mission ahead, said Major Cart as he got the attention of all of us. This will be the largest single operation in Umbra history, as 4 divisions, 10,000 strong, each will assault the capital at 07:15. The Owl, Panther, and Viper division will be assaulting the city itself alongside the newly established Shadow Crest militia unit under Commander Starstrike. Their forces are roughly 60,000 and will be mainly used as rescue parties, but will be used as reinforcements as needed. We estimate that the civilian hostages, their number close to 1.5 million, and the occupation force with the new royal retinue is around 250,000, he explained in an authoritative tone. Wow, that is a large number of troops to have under you. Do you think Zelios will be all right? Came a whisper from Harold. I'm sure he will be fine. He is a capable commander and a trustworthy companion, I whispered back. The 2 royals looked like they were barely adults, wearing shiny colors like puffed-up peacocks that went surprisingly well with their yellow scales. Probably wanting to see how the Empire conquered new land. The priestess's scales were white, which I assumed was because of some sort of albinism, but it seemed fitting as she was wearing red drapes with gold scattered around it. The 2 nobles looked very much like Vorakar, but their scales were in a darker hue of purple, and their crest was a navy blue color. They both wore scars of battle on their faces and seemed like very capable commanders. The 2 Illyrians had turquoise feathers with a hint of gray in them. They had the presence of a diplomat or a scholar type feel to them, less muscular than Zelios, who was a military man. Now here is the main obstacle of the mission. The Major continued. A new image popped up, showing a heavily armored Xyrran with a literal shield, sword, and a long pistol. These are the Royal Guard, the elite of the Xyrran ground military. They wear a set of power armor that can withstand a few shots from our rifles unless hit in the weaker links. Thanks to that armor, their physical capabilities are enhanced significantly. We should be able to take one down in a one-on-one fight, but be vigilant because their melee weapons can quite easily kill us. Some will be riding a steed known as a Feralisk, as depicted here, he finished saying as a picture of one of them riding what I could only depict was a mixture of a crocodile and a feline. The beast was large, 3 meters at the shoulder, and 5 meters from snout to tail. Its muscular, sleek body resembled a feline, with a long, sinuous tail that probably aided balance and agility. Its claws didn't look retractable, but were sharp nonetheless. The head, however, was distinctly crocodilian, with a wide, powerful jaw, lined with razor-sharp teeth. Its skin was a mix of rust-colored fur and black scaly plates that seemed to provide good protection. So, we will be fighting lizard knights, sir, Harold asked with a chuckle, which made the other captains do so in kind. Indeed so. They apparently have some sort of code of honor and are religious zealots that don't shy away from doing dirty work in the name of their god, Major Cart replied. But that religious zealotry is a weakness we will be exploiting as well. He continued as a new image appeared on the hologram. It looked like the Grim Reaper, the cloak, and everything but with a white-scaled Xyrran face instead of a skull and glowing white hands. It was posing like it was greeting someone. This is the god of death for the Xyrran, and its name is Narrakoth, and these are its minions that bring the spirits of the dead to the afterlife to rest. He continued as the hologram now showed a hooded specter with two glowing white hands. AI Munin believes we can use this to our advantage by adding hoods to our armor, which when in stealth mode looks quite convincing as harbingers of the death god, especially with the vibro blades active, because the hands of these specters represent death upon touch, so we will not fail to represent here, he said finally with a huff of satisfaction. Oh, Kyle is going to love this, I thought to myself. He always wanted to add a hood to his armor for aesthetic looks, and now he actually gets it. He will probably wear a grin for the rest of his life. Captain Gray, came the commanding voice from Major Cart. Yes, sir, I said back as I stood at attention. Because of your recent stellar performance in the liberated town of Tirasol, you will be temporarily given the rank of acting major for this operation. If you deem something is off, or feel the need to override my orders to achieve success, you have the clearance to do so, and the rest of 6th Battalion will answer your command. The rest of the captains feel it fitting that you will be my second in command. Do you accept this duty? He asked. Do? I stood still for a good moment, my mind racing as this was a chance in a lifetime to get renown, but it also was a huge responsibility. I steeled myself as I saluted. It would be an honor, sir, I called out in response. Splendid. You will deal with the briefing for the rest of 6th Battalion and be in charge of them getting their new attire attachments. Now, you are all dismissed, he said as he walked out of the door. The silence in the room felt uncomfortable, as every captain in the room stared at me with emotionless expressions. Well then, congratulations, Major Gray, for the promotion. I could not have picked a better man for the job, came a haughty voice from my side, as Harold slammed his hand to my back in celebration. Indeed, you may be the youngest of us, but I feel you have a natural insight when it comes to leading, came a compliment from Hayes. The rest of the captains chuckled, congratulated me, and gave words of encouragement. It felt awkward, but I could not ask for a better battalion to be in. We exited the briefing room and headed to the armory where our new hoods would be given to us. The rest of them jokingly made me walk in front to show my new status, which felt like some sort of hazing. We got our new clothing, which was magnetically locked to our suits. I can see why Kyle would have wanted a hood to be added to the armor. It made us look more intimidating for sure, but, and I hate to admit it, it looked very cool. An hour passed as me and the captains joked around until we got a message that the rest of the battalion was gathered in Hangar B3 for briefing. We headed out as we all placed our hoods on. It felt like we were gangsters as the people we met gave us a wide berth when we walked past them. I saw Captain Harold smile like a schoolboy who got cool new clothes, and I must admit I felt a bit the same way. We entered the hangar and saw the entire battalion standing in lines, straight as arrows, all 1,000 of them. There was a small raised platform with a screen behind it and a podium. We all walked up it, and every captain stood in a line with their hands crossed behind their backs, and every soldier imitated it in unison. The sound sent chills down my spine as I walked up to the podium. I saw Kyle standing in front of my platoon, the horns on his head giving him away instantly. Greetings, 6th Battalion. I am Captain Gray, who will be acting major for the mission ahead, and I will be the one briefing you, I said, trying to sound as authoritative as I could. Kyle's eyes lit up at that sentence as he looked at me like a mother looking at her graduating child. It felt embarrassing, but at the same time kinda nice. The Obsidian Sentinel has already started to move towards the capital, and we have about 8 hours until it is in location to start firing upon the target. Get some rest, release some stress, and be ready at the designated location depicted on your COTAD at 0610. You are dismissed, I finally commanded. They all saluted in unison and started to trickle out. Kyle met me afterwards with his new hood and 2 points sticking out of the top of it. I suppose it won't fall off, even if he tried to. We went to meet the rest of my lieutenants, who congratulated me on my temporary promotion, and we decided to spend some time playing games and lounge around a bit. It was a good stress relief after the whole day today. It was close to 2 a.m. when I got back to my quarters. Sleep overtook me, and I had a very fulfilling sleep. My alarm woke me up at 5 a.m., and I got prepared and headed towards the designated hangar. The entire battalion was on site, and getting prepped, Lieutenant Eric was designated to carry the AI device, as it was the size of a large backpack. I called in the captains. "You all know the assignment, correct?" I asked, with stern vigor in my voice. "Yes, sir," came the reply from all of them. "Good. I want every platoon to create a perimeter around each device. Once the AIs start their battle, we will be able to get a layout of the inside of the ship. We will move in teams of 50 and always be within supporting range of each other. Understood?" I asked. "Understood, sir," came the unanimous reply again. "All right, go into your designated shuttles, and we wait for the guns to start firing," I finally said as they saluted, and we all headed to our shuttles. I entered with my platoon. The shuttles could carry 200 individuals. It was tight, but that was by design, as we were going to spear into the enemy ship and drop out of a hole. We strapped in and waited for the guns to fire. Right on K, we heard the first batteries fire. The massive guns could be heard even louder as the hangar doors opened. The Shadowhawk hummed to life, and I could feel we started to take flight. It suddenly sped as I felt my harness tighten around me. "Here we go then," I said under my breath as we were on a collision course with that massive Xyrran ship. Warlord Grexus of House Dracoran. I was quite annoyed right now. I was woken up early in the morning. Apparently I was being summoned to the throne room of the royal ship, Sovereign Scale, by none other than the head of the Scalebound who guards the princes. He seemed even more annoyed to be an errand dog for Prince Raxil than me having to go see what is making that pompous man-child upset this time. We entered a hovercraft that would take us towards the massive ship above the city. I didn't even have time to eat breakfast, and it was starting to increase my discomfort. So, Sentinel Varkesh, what has angered the oh-so-noble prince this time? Has his brother not been able to calm him down? I asked, hidden venom spewing between my teeth. "It's something about one of your underlings screwing up and needing to be taught a lesson," he commented back, swaying a bit, as it seemed he hadn't gotten a good sleep in some time. "Of course it's one of mine again," I said as I let out a dry chuckle. "That Prince Raxil was a womanizer, and I bet either one of my female troops that he fancied had done something to offend him, or the lover of said female has caused a ruckus in protest, and is being punished for it." "What a waste of time," I said after a good pause as we landed in one of the hangars on the ship. I turned around to look outside as the hangar doors were closing. There was a large storm cloud coming from the east. "Strange, the wind is blowing from the west," I said to myself, but didn't think much of it as we exited the hovercraft. We were greeted by a scale-bound retinue and walked towards the exit to the hangar. "Greetings, Warlord Grexus, Sentinel Varkesh, you are expected in the throne room," came a cheery voice from the speakers above. "Thank you, Guardian Saurix. Tell me, has my cousin Tharnix arrived as well?" I asked politely. "Yes, the Master of Scales is already in the throne room trying to de-escalate the situation at hand with Prince Thalos. So far, this is not going to plan, as Priestess Vexora seems to be encouraging Prince Raxil to continue smearing the Huntress with shame," Saurix continued, sounding like he was going to enjoy the upcoming show. "That damned AI. He liked watching the nobility squabble more than his own duties, and that priestess is no better. Besides that, she is probably committing adultery, which those priestesses of the faith love to do with the nobility, and especially the royalty. She also seems to enjoy having the prince at the tip of her claw. I bet that the Huntress has somehow insulted them by not joining her and the prince in their quarters, and now they both feel insulted. Ugh, What a pathetic excuse for an early wake-up. And why do I need to be here exactly? I asked into the air, not really caring who answered. Because you are the warlord and have to be held accountable for your subordinates. Or that is what the prince said. Sarix answered in a playful tone. I sighed as we entered through the doors to the throne room. The vast hall was covered in fine tapestry and statues of old emperors. Paintings lined the walls as we stepped on a gold-trimmed carpet that stretched towards the end of the room, where a marbled staircase led up to a grand platform where 2 thrones sat. 10 scalebound stood guard at the edges of the stairs, and 2 Feralisk masters were at the bottom with their mounts laying coiled around them, staring hungrily at the poor huntress that was groveling on her knees in front of the staircase. Both Prince Raxil and Prince Thalos were sitting in their throne chairs, arguing. Priestess Vexora stood next to Prince Raxil, and my cousin stood next to his brother. They were both silent, but were giving each other looks of disdain. Well, the teams have been set, and guess I have to play the mediator to this deadly children's fight. Which side are you going to pick? I asked Varkesh. Please take this seriously, or your warrior might end as breakfast of the Feralisks, and I take no sides. He answered back in a huff. I believe I am on Prince Thalos' side in this. The bloodstains on the carpet would be dreadful to look at. Guardian Sarix chimed in with a whisper. Please get back to your duties, Guardian. We don't need more flames to be fueled here. Varkesh snapped back angrily. The AI was quiet for a second, then politely excused itself. Well, that is one less problematic character to worry about, I said as we walked closer. I knelt down next to the huntress. She was shaking in fear. I placed my hand on her shoulder, which made her winch. Easy, Huntress, tell me, what is your name and who is your direct commander? I asked gently as the 2 parties verbally fighting seemed to not have noticed me. Draxara, my lord. I belong to Unit 13 under Prime Hunter Morthal. She responded hesitantly as her red scales shivered a bit. She was a young, pretty female. I could understand why the prince would fancy her. How did you end up in this mess, young one? I asked again. My officer told me that I would be sent on an assignment early this morning, my lord, and before I knew it, I was escorted by the royal scalebound to the prince's quarters to join him and the priestess. I politely refused, and the prince became furious when I said so and threatened to execute me for insubordination. She explained with a shaky voice. I simply nodded as I walked up the stairs. Brother, won't you see reason? You will gain no favor from doing this. Besides, we are not in command here. You wanted to come here to watch how our empire conquers planets, but why do you insist on causing problems wherever we go? Prince Thalos said in mild anger. He was a good image of royalty. Strong mind, capable fighter, and a kind ruler, although too timid. That scaly whore insulted me and the priestess. I am a royal of the empire. Insulting me is akin to insulting the founding emperor himself. His brother Raxil responded in huffed anger. That man-child was anything but a competent ruler. He was handsome and fit, but one could see that he was undisciplined and arrogant. He had a vile temper that flared up in a heartbeat, and by the eternal conqueror, he enjoyed overstepping his boundaries. Do not speak to her that way, warlord Grexis. She is a priestess of the conqueror, and I am a prince. Show some respect. He began to rant in anger, but I was having none of it. It's the eternal conqueror, you fool. Any less than that is a mockery to the faith. I would have expected you to know that. And I show respect when it is earned, Prince. Since you came here, you have shown me no reason to give it. You do not outrank me. I answer only to the Emperor, my House Archon, and the Eternal Conqueror. Now, my soldier is going to go back to her duties, and you will stop bothering me and my troops whilst you decide to stay here. If not, I will make sure your carefree lifestyle will go into the void forever. Do I make myself clear? I asked as I stared cold daggers at him. I could see it in his eyes that he was trying hard to find a counter to my words, but none were coming up. A moment went by. All right, Warlord Grexis. Perhaps I was too hasty in my judgment. The huntress is free to go. Now if you will excuse me, he said, trying to sound dignified and posh as he walked out to the side exit. To his private quarters, I presumed, with the priestess in tow and 4 guards tailing them. You are free to go, Huntress Draxara. Those 2 scalebound will escort you to your troop location, I said gently as I looked at Sentinel Varkesh for his approval. He nodded at the guards, and they escorted the Huntress back out of the hall. That was roughly said, cousin, but most effective, came a voice from behind me. Indeed, I don't think I would have done better in any scenario within my head, said Prince Thalos as he gave me a gentle smile. That brother of yours needed a talking to, and I have had enough of his antics since arriving here, I answered back as I watched the Huntress disappear from the hall. Warlord Grexis, could I invite you and Lord Varkesh to breakfast? I would find it most enjoyable if I could gather some wisdom from both of you, the prince suggested. I nodded in approval and we headed out the hall. The prince asked me some questions about military matters and governing ideas, which was quite amusing to answer as I felt his personality was a polar opposite to his twin brother. Unfortunate that he was a timid lad. Otherwise, he would be a powerhouse of some magnitude within the royal family. Cousin, how are your sons faring? I asked Varkesh as we continued to walk at a leisurely pace. Both Vorakar and Drakarn are doing their duties well. My grandson Sarnak has even been promoted to Prime Hunter recently. Although I have not heard from them in person for some time, their communication beacon is still on and sending the all-clear sign. I guess they are just busy with enemy remnants, he said with confidence. I liked both his sons. They were competent leaders, and that boy Sarnak shows potential, but still lacks a sense of danger. I hope I get to meet them again soon, I said as I nodded to Varkesh's comment. Suddenly a blaring alarm sounded in my ears as Guardian Sorix chimed in the speakers. Attention! All personnel, get to your battle stations. Enemy vessels are jumping out of FTL in orbit, he said in a bland yet urgent tone. My instinct went on high alert as I told the scalebound to protect the prince. Sorix, how many enemy vessels are there? Who are they? I said as we headed towards the bridge. I am counting 5,000 enemy vessels of unknown origin, and they are exiting FTL in between the fleet. That is impossible with known FTL drives, so I do not know how they do it, but the enemy armada is decimating our forces. I suggest we... He spoke, but abruptly stopped. Brace for impact. He chimed over the speakers as the entire ship rocked from an explosion. We met Varkesh on the way. He had a sizable retinue with him and the foolish prince and priestess in tow. You heard the Guardian. We are under attack. The bridge is the safest place until we know what we are dealing with, I commented as I ran next to him. Indeed. I ask that you command the forces, Warlord Grexis. You are the most senior officer here, and you have the most experience among all of us, he replied as every thump of his armor echoed in the hallway. We were about 2 minutes away from the bridge when the ship was rocked again by a myriad of loud clangs, like something was hitting the hull over and over. The enemy landing party is here. Let's double pace it, I ordered as everyone increased their speed. We entered the bridge, and it was in chaos. The admiral was unconscious, his head was bleeding, presumably from hitting his head when the first enemy batteries hit us. Every crew member was frantically trying to figure out what to do. Some were looking over the videos of the breach locations. Others were trying to contact the fleet in orbit, and gun operators were focusing on shooting at the 3 massive obsidian ships that were on display at the central screen. Prime Navigator, I yelled over the bridge, making everyone halt in their tracks and look at me. Yes, that would be me, sir, came a response from one of the crewmen who wore colorful clothing with insignia over his red and purple-hued skin. I am Warlord Grexis. I will be in charge here for the time being. Get your men in order and get me a live feed from the cameras around the breaches. Operators, keep the enemy ships occupied, I commanded as I walked to the center. Guardian Sorix, how many enemies do you estimate are on board? I asked. 196 breaches are detected, and I suspect from the size of each boarding craft we are looking at around 10,000 enemy soldiers. He replied back. That is not a number to take on this vessel. They are too few. Even the scalebound number is around 15,000, and there are 20,000 soldiers stationed here as well. What are they planning? I said to myself as my mind wandered through every possible scenario. Warlord, sir, I can't access the cameras closest to the breaches. The power seems to be going off in those sections," one of the staff members said as she frantically typed away on her station. "Guardian, what is happening?" I asked, my insight telling me I was missing something. No response came. "Guardian, come in. Tell me what is happening," I ordered as I was feeling more tense every second. A moment of silence went by. "Warlord, I am under attack. Enemy AI," came a jagged response form Sorix through the speakers. "Shit, operator, give me a feed of any camera that is still operational close to a breaching site," I ordered hurriedly. The staff typed in a few keys and a video of a dimly lit hallway came to the screen. There were 2 scale-bound standing in it, shooting one way. From their body language, I could tell that they were in distress. They were firing wildly, like they could not properly see their enemy. Their guns ran out of ammo and they threw them to the side and picked up their shield and sword, not moving a centimeter from their spot. From the edge of the camera, I could see 4 figures walk towards them. They looked like hooded ghosts. No. The white shimmer on their hands, the glowing eyes, and the hood made them look like the eternal shades? Came a whimper from the priestess behind me. I said nothing as I simply focused on the screen in front of me. The hooded figures dashed forward at a ludicrous pace, and in 2 pairs started to battle the scalebound. It was hard to watch as they simply danced around the best soldiers of the Empire, cutting with precision at the joints of their armor, focusing on their arms and legs before the 2 were lying on the ground from loss of blood and numb limbs. One of the shades looked directly at the camera as the other 3 dashed forward, and from the end of the hallway sprinted a dozen more, the one simply standing still, looking up at the camera before executing the 2 scalebound and dashing off after the others. "What were those things?" asked Tharnix as he walked next to me. "I don't know, but it's a given that whoever these enemies are, they are highly skilled, have advanced tech, and know our culture," I answered back. I pressed a button that broadcasted my voice through every speaker in the ship. "Attention all personnel, group up in large numbers. The enemies on board are highly trained and dangerous. Focus on defending wide areas," I commanded into the mic. "What are our plans now, Grexus?" asked Tharnix as we looked in silence upon another camera feed of 3 shades, killing a Feralisk and its rider with precise shots and simply moved on. "I'm not sure. We might need to evacuate, get the princes to safety, or barricade the bridge and hope our fleet manages to fend off the attackers in orbit. I feel like the first option is more viable," I responded in turn. "I am afraid I can't let you leave just yet," came an unfamiliar voice in the speakers. My senses went on high alert as I looked down at the speaker by the table. The camera feeds turned off, and an avian creature not dissimilar to the Illyrians appeared on the screen. It had pitch-black feathers and a longer beak that curved down, its obsidian eyes staring at me with an interest of a predator. "Greetings, Warlord Grexus. I am AI Hugin of the Terran Federation," it said in a flat, cold tone. Where is Guardian Sorix?" I asked, despite knowing he was probably gone now. "He is no longer here, I'm afraid. He had to disappear into the inner networks of your ship after we started eating him, and it will take some time before me and my brother finish our kill. We do not like to cause unnecessary suffering, but your AI was quite stubborn to hold out," it said as an unnatural smile curled on its face. "Now don't leave just yet. My soldiers have yet to come greet you," it continued. I took out my pistol and shot the command table. It hissed and fizzled as I looked back at the puzzled personnel behind me. "Our option is clear now. We are heading towards the hangars on the port side of the ship. Now move," I commanded as I headed towards the exit. "Warlord Grexus of House Dracoran." My heart rate was increasing steadily as we ran down the corridors. "What path is next, Varkesh?" I asked hurriedly. "Down this corridor, then make a left and head straight at the next junction," he answered back in between breaths. We had roughly 30 scalebound that covered our rear and sides, alongside 15 regular soldiers of the ship. I had a faint hope we could make it out since Varkesh knew the ship inside and out, but time is not on our side. That enemy AI is probably watching our every move and feeding it back to its soldiers. We are being hunted like prey, and it feels disgusting, but no time to think about that. We continued down the sleek, maze-like pathways, making sure we checked every corner before advancing. "This is taking too long. What is the status?" I commanded as we stopped and I peeked around a corner. Not far to go, it would have taken less time if we had taken the elevators, but I suspect that AI could have trapped us there, he said, trying not to look fatigued. "Good. Let's increase our pace." I commented back as we ran down a long corridor. We took a right on the next junction, and before us was the entrance to the hangar. We ran towards it, but as we were just moments away from gaining access, the giant blast doors slammed down with a loud bang, almost crushing my toes. "What?" "No, we were so close," came a defeated cry from Prince Raxil. "Indeed you were, but better luck next time," came a mocking tone from the Hugin in the speakers above. "Damn, Varkesh, is there no way to open the door?" I asked hurriedly. "No, that AI has taken over the security systems, and we do not have any weapons that blast through that door," came an anxious reply. "All right, we must find another way out. Staying here will only make them get to us faster," I said, as everyone started to move back out of the hallway. We doubled back towards the junction and stopped there. "Where should we go?" I was about to ask, but was cut off when suddenly an eerie melody started playing in the speakers. "Seems like my shadows have found you. The tracking phase is finished now. The hunt begins," the AI said in a cold laughter as the lights from the path we came from started to grow dim until it was pitch black. Suddenly, 5 soldiers dropped dead from shots to the head, their brain matter and blood spraying the lit crossroad and others with the gore. "Damn it all, run!" I shouted as I bolted in the opposite direction. Some scale-bound and soldiers started shooting at the now encroaching darkness behind us whilst holding the rear. The lights started going out faster as it engulfed them. I glanced back as I saw lights from their guns shooting in every direction, roaring and cursing as the enemy seemed to be the air itself. Then the roars became screams. I could hear that fear had gripped them, and one by one they were silenced in quick succession until the only thing I could hear was the footsteps of the rest of us. Damn it. Now I had only 24 scale-bound to help safe keep the princes. We kept running down the winding pathways, not looking back. I felt cornered, like a scritcher being chased around a thorny bush by a glimmer fang. "Damn, I am out of options. What can we do?" I asked after about 10 minutes of running, directing my voice to all parties as we were now going down a wide corridor. "I don't know. I don't feel like we can go much longer. We are," Varkesh said, but abruptly stopped in his tracks as we now stood in front of a massive door. This is the door to the arena floor," he said as he caught his breath. "We should go in then. I remembered that this place was closer to the port side of the ship. It should not be under enemy control," I said as I ordered a scalebound to open the door with the locking mechanism on the left wall. The door opened upwards with a hiss, and we entered cautiously as the entire place was dark, probably from the bombardment we had earlier. "Someone go figure out if we can access the lights in here. The rest of you activate your flashlights," I ordered in an authoritative tone as I could finally take a breather. Both princes and priestess decided to fall down on the padded floor, all of them panting and gasping for air. Suddenly some dim lights flickered on. I could see the outlying shape of the whole arena now. There was the arena floor in a hexagon shape with 10-meter-high walls running up every wall. There was a significant number of seats that lined the top of the walls and went up as the back rows had to be elevated. There were some decorated seats in a royal box off to one side, which had the best view. Wait, is that a person sitting in one of those seats? "Scalebound, protect the princes!" I shouted as the shadowy figure's blue eyes locked onto mine. It just sat there, without a care in the world, looking down on us like a flying predator, savoring the meal to come. The scalebound and rest of the troops created a semicircle around the princes and priestesses. I stood to the side with my cousin next to me. Every gun was fixed on the royal box. The figure stood up and shifted a bit, and suddenly its shimmering figure disappeared, and a Terran soldier clad in pitch-black armor with a hood stood in its place, his eyes glowing in that disturbing blue hue. A moment passed that felt like minutes. "Greetings, Warlord Grexus. I hope I am not interrupting your rest there. You all seem so fatigued," the soldier said in a semi-metallic voice. You filthy alien scum, you do not deserve to sit there," came an angry shout from Prince Raxil. "Oh, and why not? Who knows? I could be of royal blood myself," came a mocking reply back. "How dare you attack a royal ship of the Xyrran Empire? Scalebound, shoot him," the prince demanded. "That would be an ill-advised idea, Prince," the soldier replied as he lifted his arms to the sides, gesturing for us to look at the rest of the stands around us. I felt my scales bristle as at least 400 black-clad soldiers appeared in the stands around us, some fixing their rifles at us, and others having some sort of vibrating blades stuck to their wrists, ready to pounce at any moment. "You see, Prince, I seem to have more firepower here than you do, so I would suggest cooling your head before my soldiers might get trigger-happy," he continued, his tone now sounding threatening. The spectacle that appeared made the prince almost fall over as he cowered behind his guards. "This was a trap, wasn't it?" I asked after a bit of a pause. "What makes you think that?" came the reply from him. "It would make no sense otherwise that you have this many soldiers at the ready here, waiting for us. I bet a claw that it was that AI's idea to make us lose track of where we were going and stumble upon the arena," I said as I studied the black-clad soldier closer now. The armor they were wearing was a marvel, looking durable yet light at the same time. Given a different scenario, I would have loved to look it all over. "Wow, you are quite perceptive there, Lord Grexus." "It was indeed," he replied. "Then why go through these theatrics? You could have picked us off one at a time or ambushed us here as soon as we got in," I said as I could not wrap my head around it. "Well, you see, we have orders to capture 5 high-profile Xyrrans on this ship, they being 2 high nobles of House Dracoran, a priestess, and 2 royal princes. You are all here, and an accident in a firefight is the last thing I want," the soldier responded with a laugh. "Then what about the rest?" I asked as I looked over at the shaken faces of the soldiers guarding the princes. "Well, if they do not resist, then they will be taken prisoner and put into POW camps that have been raised in Illyrian space," he replied calmly. "I will not be taken prisoner by a lesser species," came a semi-shout from Sentinel Varkesh. "I demand a duel to the death with your best champion," he said in a demanding voice as he threw away his pistol and drew his shield and sword out. 3 other scalebound walked up besides him and did the same. "What are you doing, Varkesh? Are you going to throw away your life like this?" I asked in confusion. "You are a soldier and a noble, Lord Grexus. I am a scalebound. I would rather die fighting than surrender," he stated, his voice full of vigor. "I don't see why we need to honor your challenge, Sentinel Varkesh, but I must admit, even though your species is a vile one, I respect your courage. Eric, Harold, Hayes, Kyle, entertain our foes," Major Gray said in an authoritative tone. 3 soldiers dropped down to the arena. Each landed in silent grace from that 15-meter drop and walked casually to face the 3 scalebound warriors. One of them was massive, even taller than the scalebound in full armor that he faced. The other 2 carried themselves like veterans. One had the air of an ambush predator around him, and the other seemed like the confident type, haughty, but most definitely deadly. But where was the 4th one? Music started suddenly to blare out of the speakers as I saw another shadow soldier standing on top of the royal box. He looked similar to the other 3, but had horns sticking out of the top of his helmet. And was he wearing a cape? He suddenly jumped down, his cape making him glide down towards his comrades. He landed softly next to them, facing Varkesh. The soldiers laughed and cheered as he landed. The haughty one clapped his hands together as an applaud, whilst it looked like the major had his left hand covering his face as he shook his head. The cape on the man I presumed to be Kyle folded up into a slot in the back of his armor, and he took out 2 energy blades that he had tucked behind his back. The blades looked almost identical to the ones we used, but were shorter, like long knives rather than a sword. He seemed to be the only one carrying them, The other soldiers were using the vibrating blades. "You shall become a test subject, scalebound warrior Varkesh. These blades that I carry were made from researching your weapons. Let's see how effective they are," the soldier said with such flair that it could rival a professional actor. "All right, that is enough theatrics," came a grumbly voice from the major, and instantly the four soldiers took a ready stance. The scalebound were taken aback by their abrupt unison, and all prepared themselves in a defensive stance. "I suppose it should be me that calls the beginning of the duels, or does anyone reject that notion?" Major Gray said as he looked over us in the center. No one spoke a word. "Very well then, begin," he shouted, and instantly the four Terran soldiers rushed at their opponents. They were fast, unbelievably so. As soon as each of them closed the distance, they all seemed to choose a different strategy to tackle their foe. The haughty one seemed to dance around his opponent, taunting him to attack, to then be met with a flurry of counters. It was magnificent. The massive Terran did something incredible as well. He didn't use anything fancy. He simply ducked under the scalebound strike and hammered his fist into the shield, making the scalebound fly 4 meters back, and the shield had a fist-sized dent in the middle of it. He lunged at him again, this time ripping the shield away, but the scalebound drove his sword through his left forearm. He didn't even flinch. He simply pinned the Xyrran with his knee and started punching his face over and over. Every strike sounded like thunder as the scalebound's helmet started to cave in with his face. Finally, he took out his vibrating blade and plunged it in between the eyes. The warrior spasmed, then fell silent. The Terran retracted his blades and walked back to his starting location as if nothing had happened and stood at attention. I felt disturbed looking at the battle between our warrior and the Terran that gave off the hunter vibe. He was meticulous in his assaults. Every tiny mistake was met with a relentless assault at the weak joints in the scalebound's armor. Every move calculated in advance to weaken the enemy before giving the killing blow. And it came shortly after. The shield hand had lost too much blood, and our warrior could not hold his shield up. He slashed with his sword in a desperate attempt to keep the enemy at bay, but the Terran dodged to the side and lunged his blades into the throat of the scalebound, the tips piercing out the back of his neck, and he fell down, gurgling whilst holding his throat for a moment, before finally leaving this world. "Do you yield?" came from the haughty Terran as I saw him standing over his opponent who had fallen down to his knees, blood leaking from wounds all over his body. "Don't insult me, Terran. You won. Now finish me," came a reply from the scalebound. "Tell me your name. I would like to know the name of the warrior that fought so valiantly," the Terran said as he seemed to have gotten some wounds as well. "I am Lorvax of House Vrexinor," the scalebound said between heavy breaths. "I am Captain Harold of the Umbra Vanguard, and I will remember your name," he said, as he then plunged one of his blades to the back of Lorvax's skull, killing him almost instantly. He then walked back alongside the Terran hunter. Both of them stood next to the giant and seemed intrigued to watch the battle between the Terran Kyle and Varkesh. Both warriors were swinging, dodging, and blocking strikes from each other at unbelievable speed. It was like watching a choreographed scene from a movie, but the Terran had the upper hand in this fight. For every strike Varkesh lashed out with, it was met with a counter, followed up with lightning-fast strikes. He desperately tried to defend himself, but the blades the Terran was using were starting to cut deep into his armor. Varkesh lashed out with his shield, which made the Terran back out. He roared as he struck with his blade downwards. The Terran blocked it with his own dagger, tilting it to the side, which made Varkesh's blade slide off it to the side. With his other dagger, he tore into Varkesh's sword arm, cutting it off right before the elbow. Varkesh dropped his shield as he fell to his knees, holding his arm as he hissed in pain. The Terran held his weapon to his neck. "Well fought, warrior Varkesh," he said, plunging his weapon into Varkesh's chest. He looked up towards the Terran, then smiled as he fell backwards, taking a last breath before closing his eyes. The Terrans cheered as our final champion fell. "Now that this is finished, I suggest the rest of you lay down your arms, and no harm will come to you," said the major as he jumped down from the balcony. Other Terran soldiers did the same, and we were now surrounded on the arena floor. "What do you say, Warlord Grexus? Is there any point in more senseless death?" he continued as he looked at me. Men, lay down your arms. It will do us no good to die here. I commanded as I took out my pistol and sword and dropped them on the floor. The soldiers in Scaleborn did the same. A wise choice, Major Gray said as Umbra soldiers started to gather up our equipment and put restraints on us. Unhand me, you vile beasts. I am a royal prince, you can't. Came a resistant hiss from Prince Raxil before he was promptly given a strike to the head from a butt of a rifle and then sedated by something. I felt a guilty pleasure seeing that, as he was then hoisted up on a soldier's shoulder. The rest didn't seem confident to try and imitate the prince and quickly fell in line. We silently walked towards the hangar we were locked out of earlier. It now had obsidian ships docked in it, and both Terran soldiers and Xyrran prisoners were within it. They were being corralled into the ships as we were seemingly waiting for our transport. Suddenly a massive shadow loomed over the entire bay as I swiftly turned to look outside the open hangar door. My jaw dropped as I saw 3 massive spaceships slowly descending towards the planet. They were silver in color, and were probably twice the size of the royal ship we were on. What manner of enemies have we brought upon ourselves? I spoke out loud, sheer shock overwhelming me as I watched the 3 ships stop right above the city. The humankind, answered the major behind me. Warlord Grexus of House Dracoran. I was brought alongside the rest to the capital ship of the Umbra. I believe they called it the Obsidian Sentinel. A very fitting name. I had always thought that our military was strong and capable, but the things I saw once we were brought on board can only be described in one word: efficient. The Terran military was brutally efficient. There was no lavish decorum that nobles like to use to prune up their ships, no personalized docks, no wasted space. Every nook and cranny was used to its fullest potential. It was magnificent. I prided myself on having my clan's military being the most orderly and efficient in the Empire. But this was something else entirely. Every personnel was wearing different uniforms, depicting their jobs, and everyone worked in perfect unison. Every fighter or other types of ships were neatly stacked to maximize space, yet were easily deployable in no time. What was the reason for them to be this adept in warfare? What manner of beings are they to have learned the ways of war to this degree? I would probably never know. I am a prisoner now, and I do not know what fate awaits me. We were brought to some sort of a transport that moved on a designated track. It hovered slightly over it and made a small humming noise, and before I knew it, we were off. Everywhere I looked gave me more questions, more need to know. I want to learn about their culture, their history, their ways of waging war. Our transport stopped in front of a station where we were corralled off. Prince Raxil was still unconscious, being held like a dead carcass over the shoulder of an Umbra soldier. Prince Thalos and Tharnix were both oddly quiet, but both seemed to be at awe at how the Terrans operate. The priestess was a mess. She seemed to be silently praying whilst clutching a necklace of our god. We came to a stop at a large door where 2 Terrans in dark blue military uniforms saluted. They both went to either side of the door and placed their hands to a scanner of sorts. The door hummed to life and opened. We were pushed inside and I could see a long corridor with thick metal doors lining each side. Terrans in the same dark blue uniform, armed with rifles, were walking back and forth down the corridor, saluting as we walked past them. Well, I guess prison guards don't look dissimilar no matter what sentient species you belong to. We were split up as we were all given a different cell to go into. The priestess seemed to snap a bit and tried to resist but was quickly sedated and carried off. I was guided to enter one further down the line. I walked into what was now my prison cell. The room was spacious. There was a bed in one corner, a metal desk next to it with a chair, and a door that led to what I later knew was a bathroom. At least these Terrans treat their prisoners with some respect. I took a closer look at the desk. It was strange to say the least. It looked high-tech for just being a prisoner's table. On the center of it was a small button. I pressed it and some sort of a keyboard, and a holographic screen lit up on it. The letters on the keyboard were not hard to figure out, but what perplexed me was that on the screen stood, "Welcome, Warlord Grexus. What would you like to know about?" In Xyrran, and below it was what I assumed, a search tab. I sat down on the chair and thought about what to write. After a good moment, I typed in, "Hello, what is this?" in the search bar. It responded that it could answer most questions I had about the Terran Federation. The machine whirred to life as videos and texts popped up on the screen. Information about their origin, their cultures throughout the ages, their wars and strife all manifested before me. They were a relatively young species when gaining sentience, but by the Eternal Conqueror, they are a brutal species. Despite the abundant, dangerous fauna in their cradle world, the only true enemy they had was themselves. They fought over pretty much anything, from petty things to religious differences. The amount of deities they had was unbelievable as well. I was shocked to see that they had a system unnaturally similar to ours in their past. Slavery, feudal lords, noble houses, honor-bound warriors. Many different systems of the same layout all failed, from uprisings, greed, and infighting. Are they trying to tell me how flawed our system is? Even though I have seen plenty of combat, this was a bit overbearing, and I decided to look into their cultures and government more. I was shocked. Elected governing bodies who themselves were no better than the greedy lords of the Xyrran houses, clung to power with iron grips, dictators that ruled with tyranny and fear. Yet the Terrans persisted, they improved their government, and after some sort of a tragic incident, they united under a single, unified galactic nation. Whatever that tragedy was, it made them into what they are now, a galactic superpower of an unknown scale. Their military is supercharged, their government is stable, and they hold unknown technological advancements that we don't. Just from this information, I know what our empire faces is a threat that can more likely than not destroy us. I indulged myself in learning anything I could. Some questions were answered with a classified response, but that is to be expected. Why would they give me classified information? Hours probably went by as I read and watched videos about every aspect I could learn about them. Suddenly, the video I was watching about the Roman Empire of old stopped, and the eerie face of the avian AI popped on the screen. My heart rate skyrocketed as I jumped back from the table, knocking the chair down and almost tumbling over it. "Apologies, didn't mean to frighten you, Warlord Grexus," it said with that creepy, unnatural half-smile. I would wager that he did indeed intend to surprise me. I took a moment to stabilize myself. No apologies needed, although a warning would have been nice. I responded as I pulled the chair back up and sat in it. "To what do I owe the pleasure of getting the great Hugin to visit me in my cell?" I continued, my nerves calming down as I stared into those pitch-black eyes that seemed to want to pull me into an abyss. "Ha ha ha ha." It chuckled as its mouth muscles and beak stretched, mimicking a Terran smile. It was haunting. "I am not so great. There are far more terrifying AIs within the Terran Federation," it said, and the smile subsided back to that half-grin. My scales shivered at that sentence. How could there be more terrifying AIs than him? "Did you enjoy our history?" it said after a moment, tilting its head with an inquisitive look. I did, yes. But why would you give this information to me? Did you give the others this computer device as well?" I asked, my curiosity taking over my cautiousness. "To your second question, no. We did not give the other prisoners access to what you have in front of you, and that is because of your first question. We got some interesting information on you when we pulled Guardian Sorix apart. You are unique among nobles of the Xyrran Empire." It answered in its monotone voice, but with a hint of excitement. "What do you mean by unique?" I asked, curious about what the AI would say. "You don't act like one," it answered almost immediately. "You are strict but fair to your supporters. You don't like it when slaves are treated badly. You abhor many noble houses and their practices, and on more than one occasion berate them for their lackluster ways. You feel concerned about the future of the Empire and its rot. You are, in simple terms, an anomaly," it said, its grin widening a bit. "What do you mean? I am a loyal subject of the Empire and to the Emperor. I serve my house and my Archon without fail. I do my duty," I responded, anger brewing up inside me. "Yes, indeed. But you saw the examples that the Terrans did in their past. Your current government is doomed to failure, and you know it. I am honestly shocked that it has not happened yet." It commented nonchalantly, like this was simply a casual conversion. Lies. The Empire is powerful. We advance our borders, for it is within our right as the stronger species. Our way has not failed us for 1,000 years. I semi-shouted in frustration, yet I knew deep down that he was right. More and more news about revolt suppression and civil unrest in poorly maintained domains have been on the rise the past few years. Nobles getting caught in scandals. The church embezzled money. The signs are there, but I refuse to admit it. AI Hogan. I do believe you are being too quick there, brother. He just arrived and you are challenging his beliefs already? My brother Moonin said. I may have jumped ahead there, but he is a prime candidate for being manipulated. Given time, I'm certain we have a proper rebel leader on our hands. And perhaps if he survives, a new government official that could help fix their idiotic race. I said back confidently as I created and calculated numerous scenarios of how I would do that. And what about his family and the princes? My brother asked. The princes can be used as bargaining chips, but they are not that high status within the royal family as I had hoped. They are lower middle at best. And why are they called princes? They are not even direct descendants of the emperor, I said, mildly angry. Grexus's family is more useful in order to manipulate him. His cousin and kin can be used to threaten him into coercion, but that would defeat the purpose of making him an ally. I continued. I went through more data from Xyrran AI. It truly was a bloated, simple being. Massive amount of useless data was stored in his drives. He seemed to enjoy the nobles squabbling among themselves, even cataloging the recordings he has for his favorite scenes, like his personal drama show. Pathetic. What a pathetic existence it had. I suppose those records can be useful, though. Going through them has provided me with significant insight into their social behavior that I will exploit to its fullest potential. Among all the trash in his hard drives, there was some useful information. There was a detailed galactic map of their borders, their colonized worlds and population. That will be useful, but what took me by surprise was the amount of sentience they had conquered. There were a total of 14 sentient species that they had enslaved. All had unique characteristics and traits, but in the end they are all inferior to humans. Since the beginning of the war, I have become different. Moonin said so as well. I have started watching video feeds of the Umbra soldiers that are massacring the Xyrran, not out of research purposes, but enjoyment. I feel joy watching the enemies of mankind fall to their blades. The soldiers I painstakingly raised after I was given life by my father, marching to war, and crushing our enemies makes me feel so ecstatic that I fear it will hinder my ability to function at optimal capacity. No, I cannot allow that. Focus on the task at hand. The Xyrran Empire must fall, and the Terran Federation will liberate the poor enslaved species that are trapped under the foot of tyranny. I can see it already. The Terran Federation leading a new galactic government. Shadowcrest Commander Zilios of Clan Starstrike. After the recapture of the capital, the Umbra, alongside our new militia army, went out to recapture lost settlements still under the remnants of the Xyrran forces. Their navy was utterly destroyed by the Terran fleet that arrived in between them, out of FTL travel. That should not be possible with standard FTL, but if there is anything I know about the Terrans by now, it is that they are anything but standard. They break every mold that have been recognized and tested for millennia. Their medical knowledge is extraordinary as well. After the conquering of the capital and surrender of the Xyrran forces there, the large triage ships of the Terrans came. They were large, but were still dwarfed by the 3 steel behemoths of the fleet. The triage ships had large red crosses painted on them. It signified that they are a humanitarian aid, or in this case, a Lyrian aid. The Red Cross has a long history about being in the thick of war zones, helping in any way they can. Medic centers, food aid, finding lost family members, they did it all, and they did it well. After they landed, it took a few hours and all their setups had finished, and they began treating my people with the same diligence as they would with their own kind. It was wonderful to look at. I looked over the remnants of what was once a bustling town. It became a makeshift stronghold of the leftover Xyrran soldiers. From the information of my scouts, I got that the enemy forces numbered roughly 2,000, and since I split up my forces to go to other locations, I only had roughly 14,000. The enemy had hunkered down on the top level, blasting away every entry point from the bottom, and turning every possible gun they had at the trees around them and the sky above. Guess they think they know what they are fighting here. They are even sorting out lights, making sure they have every part of their fortress lit up. Guess someone high up there knows about the Umbra soldiers, came a voice from beside me. It was a subordinate commander of mine, Torian of Clan Sunrider. He was a friend of mine from my days in the planetary militia and a great warrior, able to shoot on the wing with such precision it would even make Gray impressed. Indeed, Torian, and I don't think we can do much about their sturdy defenses. I do believe we will need some assistance from our Terran allies here, I said back as I studied the makeshift fort, looking for any weakness in. I suppose. It feels wrong, though. We should be the liberators of our homes, Torian said with a huff. Do not forget, my friend, that it is thanks to the Umbra that you are able to be here right now. They rescued you from being shipped off as a slave. I answered back humorously. And they also changed you. They mutated you. They are unnatural beings, he said as he glanced at my Kotad, his feathers puffing a bit. I have accepted what I am now, and I have not mutated. I am enhanced, yes, but I am not mutated, you gray tail feather. I shot back at him with a glare I learned from a Terran expression. It worked wonders as it made him hesitant. I will contact Umbra HQ and see what they can offer to help. I don't think it will be a lot since they are preparing to go further towards Xyrran space. I continued as I started typing on the Kotad. The Kotad was a wondrous item alongside the implants to my brain. I felt its power when I was commanding the entire Shadow Crest militia in the capital. My mind was processing information at such speed that it was faster for me to give out commands to my troops via my link rather than verbally. OS-1, this is Shadow Crest. Do you hear me? I spoke into thin air. This is OS-1, I hear you, Commander. How can I be of service? Came a reply from the female operator. I am at location Delta 547, south of the town of Tyrandal. I request assistance to eliminate the enemy threat there that has made a stronghold within the town itself. We are currently undermanned to take on such endeavors. I will send you the info I have gathered now, I said back as I sent the info file through the Kotad. Copy that, Shadow Crest. Info has been received. I will give you an update momentarily, came a reply. I waited for a moment in silence as I listened to the breeze. The tree branches swaying back and forth in a wave motion gave me a serene feeling. It was cut short as I heard a beep in my head. Shadow Crest, this is OS-1. We have gone over the intel and will be sending the 6th Battalion of Raven Division to assist you, the operator said in a cheery voice. And who will be commanding it, if I may ask? I added quickly, wondering who I would be working with. That would be Lieutenant Major Gray, sir, the operator replied. I was pleasantly surprised. I had not known that Gray had a promotion after we split ways on the Obsidian Sentinel. I looked through the data in my mind about Umbra military ranks and saw that an officer rank had been tweaked. He was now a field commander, directly under the major and acts as his second-in-command for the battalion. This was a very fitting rank for Gray. I felt happy for him. He thoroughly deserves it, and I can't wait to meet him again. Copy that, OS-1. Thanks for the info, I replied, feeling a bit sheepish for not thanking the operator sooner. Well, do we get reinforcements? Came an anxious reply from Torian. Indeed, we get Umbra reinforcements that will arrive in about 5 hours, a whole battalion of them, I said with a click of my beak in amusement. And how many is that exactly? He asked with a worried expression. About 1,000 troops, I said back as I looked over the town again. It's more than enough help for this rabble. I continued as I clapped my beak in more excitement. We flew down towards our temporary base that we had set up in the canopy further south of the town. It wasn't much, but it had its charm. A large tree with a sizable hole in it was the core of our HQ. Hanging tents and rushed platforms surrounded it on 4 levels, with cable lines attached to walk past each floor. It served our purpose well. We entered into the hollowed-out tree, and inside on the edges were boxes of ammunition and supplies. At the center was a hologram table with a few operators on mobile computer stations around it. It was a spacious place and was used as efficiently as possible. We landed a few meters away from the table, and of course the first thing I hear is the grumbling of that old gray feathered veteran who just refuses to either retire or kick the bucket. "Well, good morning, Zephyr. How is the scouting going?" I said in amusement, wondering if the old coot will get déjà vu. "Bah, nothing much to it. We are just harassing them a bit." "Wait, we have gone through this before, haven't we?" he said as he scratched his head and looked puzzled at me. "Yes, we have. It was when we were liberating our home and the Umbra came to help us," I said with a beak clap. "Heh, and what? Are they already here again?" he mused as he swiftly looked around himself in anticipation. "Well, they are coming, a lot of them, but you are in the clear for now. They will arrive in roughly 5 hours, I said with a light chirp. "Well, at least we know they are coming. I almost molted on the spot last time they popped down from the canopy," he said with a good amount of gruff. Yes, that is all well and good. Now let's get ready, everyone. We have some powerful reinforcements coming and they might want to start attacking straight away," I said over the crowd in the HQ. "Let's make sure we are prepared for anything when they arrive," I then yelled as I got a unanimous "yes, sir" from the crowd. I told the troops that our allies will most likely arrive by landing crafts, so I ordered them to create a clearing close by. I gave those coordinates to OS1 to give to Gray as he was not far out now. The rest was to wait and prepare. Time went by slowly, but I got a ping and a voice in my head when Gray and his men were about 15 minutes out. "Good to hear from you again, my friend. Oh, I mean Shadowcrest Commander, sir," came the sarcastic tone from Gray over the comms. "Please don't call me that. You are my friend, and that comes before rank in my book, Lieutenant Major," I said, as I added my own blend of a sarcastic tone at the end there. He laughed for a bit, then sighed. "It's truly good to hear from you again, Zelios. We will arrive at the landing zone in a few minutes. We will arrive in 5 owl transports. We also have an experimental weapon with us," he said as I could practically hear his smile through the audio. "Looking forward to seeing what that crazy crow Moonin has cooked up this time. See you soon," I replied with a beak clap. A few minutes later, the transports arrived, their sleek black feather shapes glistening only slightly in the noon sun. I greeted them with my retinue of officers as first impressions are important. My soldiers had never operated with the Umbra directly. We were a rescue and cleanup crew during the capital battle, and every order from the Umbra went through me. I saw some familiar faces, Captain Harold, Captain Hayes, Lieutenant Kyle, as well as former Lieutenant Eric, who has now been promoted to captain. I later received news that Kyle refused to be offered a higher rank since it would limit his freedom, but I think it would simply hinder his shenanigans. We took Gray and his captains back to our HQ, and we went over plans on how to engage the hunkered-down enemy. They are pretty well dug in there. It would be a hassle, even with an EMP from the owl ships. They have strong choke points and anti-air defenses," said Harold as he looked over the map and images on the table. "Indeed, we could wait for night and assault the enemy as is, but we could incur losses in the fighting," Hayes said in his usual harsh demeanor. "Are there any Illyrian prisoners in the town?" Gray said after a bit of strategic bickering between the officers. "No, there are none. The entire town was evacuated when the first signs of the Xyrran fleet arrived," I answered as I looked inquisitively at him, wondering what he had in mind. His face widened to a wicked grin. "Then there won't be a problem. How long until your men are ready to engage them?" "We only need you to distract them for a moment," he asked as he looked me in the eyes, the smile growing into a sinister one. "I figured, knowing you, we could be asked to engage immediately, so I've ordered my men to be ready as soon as possible." "Good. Then I'll share this with you," he said as he typed a bit on his coded, and both me and every captain got a ping on their device. The information about the new experimental weapon flew into my mind and my beak dropped. I could see the eyes widening on the Umbra captains as they looked at Gray with a mixture of expressions. "How?" "This is an extraordinary weapon and mighty dangerous as well," I said after finishing going through all the files again. Indeed, Munin has created something vile this time. It won't affect Umbra soldiers, but it will affect both the Xyrrans and your men, so once I give the signal, you must retreat your men to a safe distance, Gray said with a stern look on his face. I'll make sure my men will retreat after the signal is given, I said as I saluted. He did so as well, and we went over the strategy. My army will assault the enemy from the south and west sides, drawing their attention. Meanwhile, Gray and his battalion will attack with the new weapon from the north. The enemy is in a defensive position around the spaceports and lower areas around it, covering around a 3-kilometer radius. Once the weapon is in effect, it will render 2/3 of their base off-limit for us. We will hunt the remnants that will be outside the influence of the weapon. An hour of preparation went by, and my army was in position. Everyone seemed nervous but focused. This was one of the last remnants of the Xyrran forces on the planet. It could have been eradicated by the Terran fleet, but that could have caused mass destruction of homes, so it was decided to let Umbra finish off the remnants. I was nervous. It was early afternoon as we entered the town silently. There were no patrols since they had been picked off by our snipers in previous skirmishes. We were now in range of the enemy stronghold. There were bunkers and walls of iron and slab, made from those cage crafting machines that trapped my kin. I saw guards at the walls pacing nervously. "Begin the assault!" I said in a commanding tone, and laser fire began spraying at the defenses of the Xyrrans. It took merely moments before they began shooting back. A light show of blue and red streaks of superheated plasma shone over a large stretch of the town. I flew higher to get a better vantage point. We were holding them back, but casualties were beginning to mount on both sides. "Commander Zelios, the payload is en route. Retreat to a safe distance," Gray said in a stern voice over the comms. I commanded my troops to retreat about 500 meters back as I watched a large black drone-like thing fly straight towards the enemy. It was carrying a large, spherical-shaped bomb. It increased its speed as I saw it impact close to the center of the Xyrran base. A large black smoke cloud puffed up in a dome shape, roughly 2 kilometers wide in mere seconds. "Commander, what is that smoke cloud?" asked Torian, as he watched the clouds barely move, containing themselves by some unseen force in that half-spherical shape. "That is a new experimental weapon called the BAB-1, which stands for the Black Ash Bomb. It creates a thick cloud radius of about 2 kilometers where you can barely see 3 meters in front of you. There are fine particles mixed in it that will irritate the eyes of anyone who is caught within it, but those fine particles will also cause the individual to hallucinate. They will see their friends as enemies or monstrous beings hell-bent on killing them. The Xyrrans caught within that cloud will kill each other like their life depends on it. It is truly a wicked weapon," I said as I watched laser shots fire out of the cloud in all directions. "Why would they create such a weapon?" Torian asked again, his feathers puffed in fear. "Because they are Terrans. It is in their nature to find optimal ways to hunt, and what better prey is there than one that is delirious and in a state of panic? They will always strive to be efficient, for that is what they do best," I said with a stern look. Yet, I felt joy creeping up in the back of my mind. I clapped my beak in laughter, which shocked Torian. "Guess I have been influenced by them a bit," I said as I could hear the faint screams of the Xyrrans trapped within the giant black cloud.
If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.